Definition, shaming of Jake. He's not a dopey dumb bitch. He gets laid. The court jester, the court DJ. It's time to dive into the case. To the case.
Good morning, everybody.
Hey, welcome back, fam. Day
A9.
9.
A9.
Nueve.
It's wild. By the way, folks, I think I got my mic working again, so I have the sound effects, so that's good. And I tried to get two puke. I got some puke. If we hear any more sexting or love messages between the potato and Lori, I got some puke sounds. Hopefully they don't make you puke. I try to not find ones that were like super gross. So here's the first one. And then and the second one is from a famous song. I don't know if you know this, Bob. This is from a song, and it's one of my favorite artists of all time. And I don't know if people who uploaded it to the site knew it's from a song. If you guys tell me if you could tell what this is from. I cut it off. The full sound effect would definitely give it away, but do you know, Bob?
I don't.
I wonder if anyone can tell me in the chat.
I don't know what that is, but it sounds more like a vomit and a shart or a diarrhea to me.
Yeah, or it's the vomit going in to the
throat. It has that stream of like diarrhea.
Nasha got it. Look at that right away. Good work. It's Eminem. It's I forget the song. It's You Don't Know How Much I Hate You or something. It's about Kim, I think. It's such a good song. Good Akasha out of the box. Very nice.
I mean, knocking it out of the park with the early morning trivia win. That's impressive.
And sorry, I sang that so well. I'm going to get a copyright claim. But for folks, they're already there. So let's check out what's going down.
Chad looks large-headed per usual.
He'll be crying himself to sleep tonight on his huge pillow.
Let me fast forward this.
Is the state ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense ready.
Yes, Judge.
Okay. Mr. Bailiff, please have the jurors brought in. We'll go on the record.
Let's bring that jury.
You will bring the jury.
We will bring the jury.
And by the way, folks, I have some fan mail set up. So for folks who have on my show, I don't think we've ever done a dual stream where I bring up comments that people leave. Sometimes they're good. A lot of times they're bad. And during the break, remind me. I'll do some fan mail. And I'll have to have Bob's mods collect some of the comments you guys get so we can include them.
Definitely. We got some fan mail on
Be seated,
Twitter.
everyone.
Somebody said that I was checked out during our live yesterday. I'm like, come on, dude.
I mean, come on. What are you?
I mean, I think people think when I'm like, if I were to get like a magic keyboard, and so that I could handle my Twitter account, which I have to manage during the day, people wouldn't think I'm checked out because I'm doing it.
Yeah, I mean, we check our things. Like we're both like checking our socials, checking the chat, checking like. You gotta. That's part of the game, folks.
Yeah, I mean that's how you know.
Good morning, everyone. We're back on the record this morning.
Delphi, all kinds of shit.
Yeah, exactly. Emails. I'm sure you
on
got 1,000
KCR 22211623,
Messages
State of
on our
Idaho
social
versus
media on
Chad Guy
all our
Daybell. The prosecution's here present. The defendant, as well as defense attorney, Mr. Pryor. Court notes the jurors are all returned and accounted for and properly seated. I've also received and reviewed the jury affirmation signed by each of the 18 jurors. So thank you again for continuing to follow the court's admonishment on your affirmation each day. When we concluded yesterday, the witness, Mr. Warwick, was under cross-examination, which will be continuing this morning. So Mr. Pryor, if you're ready to proceed with continued cross, you can do that. As you make your way over to the podium, and you can do that now, Mr. Pryor, I'll just note to the witness, Mr. Warwick, you are still under oath for your questions. And I just want to confirm, did you review any of the trial testimony since you left the stand yesterday? Okay, you did not. Can you check your microphone also to make sure that's working? No. Okay. All right. Mr. Pryor, then if you'd like to continue with cross, we can.
Spitfire Dragon says, Jay, you could save your wife some time and tell her Chad's wearing a whole lot of JCPenney. I will let her know that she's coming back today, folks. So you know that what that means for me. I am scrambling. I'm doing laundry. I'm doing dishes. I'm trying to make the house
like you don't live like a pig.
Yeah, it's been a week, folks. So
yeah,
this morning. Thank you.
It's usually Allie when I'm gone.
I posted on Twitter for folks. I don't know if you follow me on Twitter, but my house starts looking like in signs where there's glasses of water with different lengths of, different amounts of water all throughout the house. So I'm working on that.
I mean, listen, those glasses of water saved the day, though, didn't they?
They did. Swing away, Merrill. Swing away.
So before he starts, yesterday the state did not get into the nightmare that David Warwick had that night. Like a very vivid, terrifying nightmare. It's interesting. And remember, the one thing that I wanted to say is that at the end of a lot of these witnesses, you're hearing both the state and the defense saying that there's, a chance or a likelihood that they're going to be recalling certain witnesses. And it's interesting because like the defense can call witnesses to bring in evidence from those witnesses that the state did not bring in during their case in chief, during their directs. That's what I was talking about yesterday. When you go beyond the scope, now the judge allowed it in this particular testimony because I don't remember him saying anything about Melanie Gibb when he was directing Warwick on the state's direct at all. So, and when he started diving into it, if I'm the state, I'm probably objecting unless I'm aware that they're going to be calling this guy again to get into the Melanie Gibb stuff. So, but yeah, I just want to note that because Allison was asking me last night, she's like, "Oh, did they get into the nightmare?" And I'm like, "No, they didn't even mention it," which she thought was interesting because it's kind of telling. So let's see where it goes this morning.
Yeah.
Morning.
Morning.
Before, I guess where I'd like to start, Mr. Warwick, is did you have an opportunity either yesterday or today to talk to the prosecuting attorney about your testimony?
No.
Prior to testifying in this proceeding, did you have an occasion to talk to the prosecutor at any time about your testimony?
No.
Do you recall testifying in a preliminary hearing in August of 2020?
Yes.
Okay. Subsequent to that, did you have an occasion to communicate either directly or through your wife with the prosecuting attorney about the manner and the substance of any of your testimony?
No.
Did you have an occasion to exchange an affidavit or a document between you and your wife and the prosecutor and the police?
I don't recall that.
Okay. Is it possible that the prosecuting attorney or law enforcement showed you an affidavit of facts and had you go over that for accuracy?
Yes.
Okay, so you did go over an affidavit, correct?
I don't know if it was an affidavit, but
It was a document.
yeah.
And in that document, it detailed the facts of this particular case and what you would be testifying about, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then there were some revisions to those documents. In other words, you would make suggestions and send them back to the prosecuting attorney, and then they would send it back, and there was a little bit of a back and forth. Do you recall that?
Nope.
Okay. Do you recall your wife bringing you an affidavit or court document saying, the prosecutor would like you to take a look at this and see if this accurately reflects what your testimony is going to be?
No, I don't.
But you do recall going over an affidavit that that was prepared by the prosecuting attorney for your review, correct?
I would say yes, according to if I'm understanding this correctly.
Okay. So in other words, there was a document prepared. You were to review that document. And then at that point, you were to return it either through your wife or directly back to the prosecuting attorney. Is that right?
I never did take it. It was just,
You never did what?
I did not take the document.
Did you read the document?
I did read it.
Did you correspond in any way with the prosecuting attorney about how and what changes would be necessary to that document?
No.
Okay. Did your wife do it for you?
No.
Okay. All right. I want to go back to something you said originally. You talked and you used a couple of adjectives to describe Chad, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think one of them you said was quiet.
Yes.
Saw that yesterday. I don't recall if you used the words humble. Was that one of them? Humble.
The words I used is he was kind and
Meek. Meek.
yeah, he was meek and humble. I've never seen he was anything different.
Okay. And throughout all of your interactions with Mr. Daybell, that's the way you found him. You found him as a very meek person, correct?
Correct.
You found him as a very humble person, right?
Yes.
You found him as a very quiet person. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And deeply religious.
Yes.
Okay.
Son of a bitch.
And you may not have agreed with
Did
all
your
of his
camera vanish
religious
again?
beliefs, correct?
Correct.
And he would not necessarily believe with all of
Hopefully
your
in a
religious
second it'll
beliefs.
come
Would
back
that be fair?
Yes.
Okay. But you respected each other for having your respective religious beliefs. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I talked to you a little bit about visions and about vibrations. I want to talk to you a little bit about seances. Do you understand the term seance?
I do.
Okay. Now, did you or with your wife or knowledge of your wife ever participate in a seance?
No,
Okay. Do you have any knowledge as to whether or not your wife participated in a seance?
I do not.
Okay. And I previously asked you about the seven gatherers, but I'm going to ask you again. You have no knowledge whatsoever of what the seven gatherers are. Is that right?
Asked and answered, Honor.
Overruled.
You have no knowledge of what the seven gatherers are. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you testified in a preliminary hearing, I believe it was in August of 2020. You recall that?
Yes.
What was the date of your marriage again?
It was December 12th, 2020.
Okay. So you testified in a preliminary hearing about 4 months before you got married. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we had your wife on previously, and she talked about the fact that you live in a different state than she is. Is that right?
Yes.
And she lives somewhere in Arizona. We don't need to say where. And you live somewhere in Utah. Is that correct?
Correct.
And how long have you folks lived separately?
Objection, relevance.
Probably about 2 years now.
Okay. And how long did you actually live together?
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
How long did you live together?
Oh, she is objecting. We just can't.
Several months.
Meaning 2 or 3 months?
No, it was a little longer than that.
How much longer?
I don't recall.
Okay. Would it be as much as 8 or 9 months?
It could have been.
Okay. But several months.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, isn't it true that the reason you got married is because you were trying to avoid having to be forced to testify against each other in a criminal proceeding?
Oh.
Okay.
Interesting. Interesting.
I want to go over.
I'm here, guys. Trying to figure out this camera situation. I'm in support with Restream again. So
And
sorry.
simply, Bell,
with
you
again
haven't
some
missed
of your
much.
testimony with the prosecuting attorney. You made mention of a timeline. You said you went to a park during one of the days. I think you came in on a Friday, right?
Friday night,
But you don't remember about what time?
I would think about 7:30.
Okay. And then you said that you saw Chad several times over the weekend. Is that right?
Yes.
How many times?
I would say more like a few times. I would say 3 or 4
Okay.
that I can actually recall.
Okay. And one of them you described as being in a park on a Saturday. Is that right?
I think, no, that was on Sunday.
That was on Sunday.
Mhm.
Okay. Did you see Chad on Saturday?
Yeah, yes.
When did you see him on Saturday? What time?
I would say it was late morning or early afternoon.
Okay. Okay. And what was the purpose? That was the time when you folks had that discussion about Tammy and some of the other items that you talked about. Is that right?
Yes.
That was the significant discussion where the vast majority of what you spoke to Chad about took place on that Saturday. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you didn't see Chad on Friday. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. And then you got up on Saturday and in one report to the police, you mentioned that you slept in Saturday and then ate breakfast at Lori's condo. Do you remember telling law enforcement that?
I don't.
Okay. Do you dispute the fact that maybe you slept in and ate breakfast on Saturday morning?
No, I just don't remember.
Okay. And then what you did is you guys got prepared and went to a seminar called the Firm Foundation Saturday right after you got done eating breakfast. Remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And according to your daughter, your wife's testimony, you spent the better part of the day and the evening at the Firm Foundation. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. So my question is this, is that if you were at this Firm Foundation all day and into the evening late, how is it that you met with Chad in the apartment on Saturday?
Because we were not at the whole event.
Okay.
We didn't attend the whole event.
And if your wife said you did attend the whole events and that she took pictures for over 9 or 10 hours, that's something she's mistaken about, right?
If she did, yes.
Okay. And you left the event during this event and came back, went to Lori's to eat. Is that right?
I don't remember.
Okay. All right. So you also don't remember talking to Chad on Saturday, do you?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right. And then when you got back from the convention late, you folks decided that you would consider starting your podcast. Is that right?
No,
Oh, you didn't have an equipment failure of your podcast on Saturday evening?
no,
Okay. And then
Okay.
you, again, expressed to law enforcement that you slept in Sunday morning, right?
I don't recall.
Okay. And did you see Chad at all on Sunday?
Yes,
When did you see him?
at the park.
Which park is that? Do you know?
I just know it was at Rexburg.
Okay. About what time was that?
I would say late morning,
Late morning.
if I'm recalling correctly.
Okay. Late morning, you saw Chad on Sunday. Do you recall meeting out at a 80 acres piece of land late Sunday afternoon?
Yes.
Okay. And you were there with Lori,
No, Lori wasn't there.
Alex,
Alex
Melanie.
and Melanie.
Okay. And nobody else was there, right? JJ wasn't there.
So who'd you say?
JJ.
No.
Okay. And when you met with Chad at the park on Sunday, how long of a meeting was that?
I would say half hour.
Okay. Did he just come right over and say, let's go out to a park, or was there another purpose behind that?
No, they wanted us to come over to the park.
Okay. Who's they wanted?
Chad and Lori.
Okay. So Chad showed up at the park, or did he come over to the condo and then you all went over to the park together Sunday morning?
I really don't remember.
Okay. Okay. But then later on in the afternoon, you met a realtor by the name of Ron Arnold at a piece of 80 acre piece of property, right?
Yes, and yes, he showed up later.
Well, he showed up with Chad later, did he not?
Yes, he did.
And what I find interesting is that you had noted in previous reports that he showed up with Chad and Chad was wearing his church clothes. Do you
Oh, hold on. There's an objection. Can you repeat that into the microphone, Mr. Wixom?
Yes, Judge, that was argumentative, at least the first portion of the question or statement.
Overruled.
Yeah, overruled. Wasn't argumentative at all.
Chad showed up at that meeting on the land in the 80 acres with Ron Arnold, and he was wearing his church clothes, right?
That's right.
So he had gone to church that morning.
Yes.
So how is it that he met with you if he was at church in the morning?
This was the afternoon.
No, I'm talking about the park.
Well, this was after the park.
Well, that's what I mean. He showed up at the.
He was serving in his calling, and him and Ron were serving together, and they came over.
Okay.
And I did not know they were coming over because I said I do not want to do any business on Sunday.
Well, I think you're missing my point, and I'll try to be a little clearer.
I
Okay.
appreciate that.
All right. You're welcome. What I don't understand is that if Chad was at church, engaged in church activities Sunday morning, and engaged in this calling Sunday, how is it that he met you, Lori, and Melanie at a park on that very same Sunday?
I don't know that he was at church Sunday morning.
Okay. Well, isn't it true that you told the investigators that he was showing up in church clothes with another gentleman who's a real estate agent?
That was in the afternoon, yes.
Right. And isn't it true they told you that they just came over from attending church?
No,
Okay. And if Mr. Arnold were to get on the stand and say that's exactly what he told you, would that be an inaccurate statement by Mr. Arnold?
well, they were attending their calling, so in a way they're attending church, but it wasn't the services.
Okay. Okay. So these visits that you claim you had with Chad were on Saturday when you were at a convention, is that right? And you happened to just take a break from a 10-hour convention that you were with your wife, right? To visit with Chad. Is that right, on Saturday?
I'm trying to recall what time we saw Chad on,
Okay.
what time I saw Chad on Saturday.
Oh, so possibly it could change now, is that right?
Well, no, I just don't remember. I just know that I was not at the whole conference.
Okay.
I didn't attend the whole conference, so
Sir, isn't it true you didn't see Chad on Friday?
Yes, it's true. I did not see him on Friday.
And isn't it true you didn't see him on Saturday?
No, that's not true.
And isn't it true, sir, that on Sunday, the only time you saw him is when he went out to an 80 acres with a couple of other witnesses, and that's the only contact at all you had with Chad Daybell over that weekend?
Objection, argumentative,
Not
Your
true.
Honor.
Which I have
Hold on.
nothing else.
Stop. All right, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Warwick. I'm sustaining that objection. I'm striking the response. Mr. Pryor, next question.
I'm done, Judge. Thank you.
Oh shit!
Redirect.
Par's
Thank you,
coming
Your
with the heat this morning.
Yeah, he is.
It's a little feisty this morning, Jay Bird.
Talking to Ali right now, trying to fix this fucking.
It's weird. It's got to be that mic, dude.
I mean, the
Morning,
option.
Mr. Warwick.
The
Good
option
morning.
is hold on. That I can if I refresh my browser, it might work, but I'm not gonna like. I don't. I'm worried that's gonna turn off the stream entirely. So I'll wait till break and maybe try that and just
Yeah, when you did it yesterday, we lost for just a like 10
The
seconds.
court feed,
We
right?
lost the court feed, yeah.
yeah.
So I want to start by covering some of the questions that you were asked initially this morning. Do you recall the defense attorney just asking you whether or not yesterday you had met with prosecutors about your testimony? Do you recall that question?
Yes,
And you answered no.
yes.
Do you recall meeting with me yesterday?
I don't. I mean, I talked to the hall, but we didn't talk about the case.
Okay. What about the day before?
No,
Let me ask this. Were there ever times that you and I, prior to you coming into court yesterday and testifying, were there times that you and I did meet and we did discuss your potential testimony?
yes.
When's the best time that you, well, let's try that. To the best of your recollection, when did we do that?
Probably a couple months ago, will be my guess.
And upon your arrival to Idaho Falls, I'm sorry, to Boise a couple of days ago, did we also meet again?
No,
You don't recall that?
I don't.
Let's move on. You were asked some questions by the defense about the way that you characterized Chad. Do you remember those questions?
Yes,
And I think the words quiet and kind and meek came up. Is that right?
yes,
Now, to be clear, over the last several years, you've met with law enforcement a few different times, haven't you?
yes.
Do you remember which law enforcement by any chance that you've met with?
I probably remember more by face than name.
Do you ever remember discussing with law enforcement your feelings about whether or not you liked Chad? Do you remember that?
Well, liking Chad or liking his ways?
Liking Chad.
I'll say yes. It's vague, but I remember.
What?
It's overruled. You can continue to answer.
What do you remember about telling law enforcement about whether or not you liked Chad?
Well, just the only thing I can recall that I was struggling with is when he approached me about doing a book. I told him that I needed time to come to understand if that was right, and if it was right, and then I needed to decide who, if it was to be done. And for the next year, it was like when he reached out to me, he just didn't acknowledge the grounds that I had set. And he was kind of forward about, he was ready and wanted to go forward like I had already agreed, and I never had. That's the one thing I can recall right now anyway, that I think that's what you're referring to.
Is it possible that you use even more descriptive language about how you felt about Chad in that interview or that time?
I mean, it could be possible, but I'm not recalling it.
If you had an opportunity to review a police report from June of 2020. Do you think it's possible that could refresh our recollection about that part of your conversation?
Yes.
Your Honor, with that, may I offer the witness a copy of the report from Detective Hermosillo from that same date?
Any objection from the defense?
Talking to the mic prior.
All right, there's a, Mr. Wixom, if you'll reference the precise date of the interview and also instruct the witness that he's just to refresh recollection with that, not read it into the record, for example, or read from it.
Will do, Your Honor, certainly. So perhaps I missed, I thought I indicated that the date of the interview was June 8th of 2020 with Detective Hermosillo. If I might ask the marshal to hand this to the witness. And sir, the court's instructing you, as normal, that you're not to read this report to the jury. Just take a moment when you receive it, review it, refresh your recollection. When you're done reading it, either turn it over or offer to hand it back to the marshal, and then I'll ask questions, okay?
Okay.
Hey, Jay, could you pause it for a second?
Into the
Paused.
All right, a couple of things. The Spitfire Dragon from our chat, who is learned in the ways of LDS, wanted to let everybody know that what callings are. Callings, this is what they were talking about. And during the earlier cross, when Pryor was asking him whether or not Chad had gone to church, and Warwick was saying, well, he was doing his calling, which isn't the same as going to church. So Spitfire Dragon said callings are jobs that the bishop or the pastor assigns you, and you're supposed to accept them without question. Could be cleaning the church, could be taking care of the kids during the sermon. And hold on, there's a follow-up. I have to scroll up here. They're volunteer positions, except you don't really have a choice. The bishop is supposed to have prayed about the callings and gotten the guidance from God. So that's what callings are. And then with respect to, I just want to make you guys aware. So police reports are not admissible as evidence. They're considered hearsay. They don't fall under the business exception rule. So that's why when they're talking about refreshing your recollection, that's why the judge wanted the attorney to give the witness instructions that he's not supposed to read it into the record, because that would be the same thing as putting the police report itself into evidence. Okay. And then with refreshing recollection, it's a very thin line, because the question isn't whether or not, now that you've read it, can you repeat what it says? It's now that you've read it, do you now have that memory again? Do you understand the difference, Jay, there?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a fine line. So that's where we're at right now. All right.
Am I on camera or am I off camera?
Dog cam.
Dog. Hold on. On the dog cam. What about now?
You were here looking very handsome.
Thanks. Now I'm on the stupid FaceTime camera. This. All right, I'm working on this. Sorry.
microphone, please, Mr. Pryor.
Judge. Just to clarify, Judge, I didn't recall a June 8th interview with Officer Hermosillo, but I did have a recollection of a June 3rd. So counsel may want to correct his date. My recollection is it should be a June 3rd is when Officer Hermosillo interviewed Mr. Warwick from my recall.
I'm referring to the date referenced in the very report that we've just handed to defense counsel. That's the best date that I'm aware of, Judge. It's the date recorded in the report.
Okay, well, we'll go off the date listed in the report.
Yeah, Michelle Redmond, from the state's perspective, I don't know why they called Warwick. I don't know what he's bringing to the table.
It's to a specific portion of the report to read
Sorry.
No, I was done.
to himself. I would call your attention to page 4 of that report and invite you to read the last 2 paragraphs, please, to yourself.
While he reads this, because of Mandy, now she sent me a video of guinea pigs. Now on YouTube, I got, as I'm trying to fix this, one of my things recommended to me is 12 things guinea pigs love the
Okay.
most. So thank you, Mandy, for sending me a guinea pig video.
You'll just turn that over then.
All right, pause it real quick again. Defense Attorney Meow has a question. Bob, are police reports allowed in for impeachment, like to slam Delphi? So the report itself is not allowed into evidence. It cannot be entered into evidence, meaning it, when the jury's deliberating, that they have the opportunity to look at evidence. So no, but you can use a police report in order to impeach somebody. So say, for instance, you have a witness on the stand and they say something on the stand that is different than what they said to the police in the report. The lawyer can say, okay, well, do you recall having an interview with such and such an officer on such and such a date? Yes, I do. And so impeachment, first you have to set up the statement that they made in court. Okay. You say that this is what your memory of that is, correct? And this is your statement today in court that this was said. And then you go back and then you can say, do you recall saying to this officer X, Y, and Z, whatever that different statement is, in order to impeach them? So you can use the reports to reference in terms of impeachment, but you can't get the report itself in.
Bob, while you were doing that, you got a sticker from W. Hippo character with stars growing in his eyes, pumping his arms in the air with the word hype pulsating above him. I love when it reads it. I love when it reads the emoji.
Me too. It's great. And it's a very accurate description of that little hippo. Thank you so much, Debbie. And thank you, Shiraz, for all those gifted memberships.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Shiraz.
Yeah.
Mr. Wixom, but I understand Mr. Pryor may have an objection, but you can ask whatever question you've got up next after that review.
Thank you, Your Honor. And just for clarity's sake, for the record, upon looking at my copy, the supplemental report that was handed to Mr. Warwick was written and dated at the top for June 28th, 2020. But defense counsel is correct that the interview did occur on the 3rd of June of 2020.
No questions, Judge, at this point.
Okay, thank you. You can proceed, Mr. Wixom.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Warwick, having had a chance to review that paragraph, did it refresh your recollection?
Yes, it did.
Would you please explain to the jury, what was it that you told Detective Hermosillo in June of 2020 about Chad?
I was really angry that he called Melanie and told her not to talk to the police.
Why were you angry?
Because when someone makes a call like that, there's something wrong. And I had no idea what was going on. My mom had just I was on the phone with my mother because she just got diagnosed with cancer. And so I was on my way over to.
Judge, objection,
Sorry.
Hold on. What's the grounds?
relevance.
Overruled. You can continue, Mr. Warwick.
Here's the relevance. I was on the phone with a broken down mother trying to get to her. Melanie's on the phone with Chad. And then when we both got off the phone, Melanie was really quiet. And I could tell she was really upset. So I just asked her, I said, what's going on? She
Judge,
said,
objection, calls for hearsay.
Yeah, this invites hearsay. Sustained.
Do you happen to recall anything else that you told to Detective Hermosillo in that interview about your feelings about Chad?
yes,
What else do you recall?
that he was manipulative.
Can you explain what you meant to Detective Hermosillo when you used the word manipulative?
Like, he gets people's confidence, and then he uses that confidence for his favor.
So I'm going to invite you to explain to the jury and reconcile how you can your statements that Chad was kind and humble and meek, but you also think he's manipulative.
Yeah, because all my interactions with Chad were kind, humble, and meek. It was that situation that happened much later. I just wasn't in that time frame. So that's when I saw a different Chad.
What was that different Chad? Describe that different Chad.
To call and tell somebody, literally tell them not to take the call with a very authoritative voice.
When you said authoritative voice, did you hear him on the phone?
No, I didn't. I just, after Melanie shared with me what the call that just happened.
You were asked about the reason behind your marriage with Melanie. You remember that question from the defense counsel?
Yes.
Why is it that you married Melanie?
Why is it? Because she's a wonderful, wonderful woman, and she was very good with my Down syndrome boy and with all my children, and we're very compatible on many things.
Is there any question in your mind that the two of you have a loving relationship?
No.
And in fact, it was suggested that perhaps your marriage was to avoid testifying against each other. Do you recall that?
I'm going to object.
Yes.
And I think I got the objection in time, Judge.
Yes, grounds.
But it's leading.
Judge, I'm just,
Overruled. You can answer.
Well,
Your Honor, could we ask Madam Reporter to repeat that? I want to make sure that I did it correctly, if she'd be kind enough to do so.
You may. Okay. And I'm going to repeat that for the record. The last question was, and in fact, it was suggested that perhaps your marriage was to avoid testifying against each other. Do you recall that?
I do recall that.
Have you ever been charged with any type of criminal charge related to this case in any way?
No.
Your Honor, may I have permission to approach on one last topic?
Approach the court?
Yes, sir.
Sidebar?
If we may, yes.
Very well.
I can fast forward this. Am I on the camera now? I think I figured out what the problem is, but I'm gonna have to do it after we.
Yeah, you're on, Jay.
It's the
So Spitfire Dragon says that obedience to the law is one of the LDS articles of faith, which is specifically why Warwick was peeved that Chad would suggest not cooperating with law enforcement.
Interesting.
Somebody had
Mr. Warwick, you were asked
I'll pause it.
I'll talk about it after. I think he's getting ready to wrap.
some questions by the defense about this meeting that you had with Chad whenever it occurred that weekend. Do you recall those questions?
Yes.
And in fact, part of those conversations involved his relationship with Tammy, his wife.
Yes.
Do you recall whether or not Mr. Daybell ever indicated to you the status of Tammy's health?
Yes.
What did he say?
He said that she was healthy.
And was that in relationship to the, let me withdraw that. Give us the context of how he explained to you that she was healthy, please.
I was asking him about his marriage, about what kind of wife and mother, and then he told me that she was going to be passing because was given a dream or a vision that she was going to be passing. And then I asked him about her health, and he said she was healthy.
Thank you. Then last couple of questions, Mr. Warwick. Without intending to be facetious, have any of your own personal visions or spiritual experiences ever led you to think that you personally have any kind of superpowers?
No.
Have they in any way caused you to feel like you have some prominent position in whatever you believe the last days events are?
No.
Have any of your visions or personal experiences ever revealed to you propriety or a way of dealing with people that you believe are possessed?
No.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
I think he just
All right.
opened the
Thank
door
you,
to
Mr. Rickson.
recross.
Judge, I think there's now some recross.
Oh, look at you, Bob.
Briefly, Mr. Pryor.
Leah Simpson in my chat said Warwick has special needs child, so I don't buy him being involved in JJ's death if Pryor is alleging that. I don't think that that's what he's alleging. Remember, Lee, I think.
So this discussion about.
Go ahead.
Real quickly, remember the defense here is that Chad is not involved with any of it. So, but I don't think that he is implying that Warwick had any hand in it. His main targets are, I don't even think it includes Melanie per se, but are certainly Lori and Alex Cox, her brother. And I had read that Stacy had made a comment, which I don't think is incorrect, but I think the Pryor is trying to allege that Melanie and Lori killed JJ, and the phone call was part of the secret from Chad. Melanie and Lori hitting each other with its stone tablet phone calls. That was the impetus of that. I don't know that he's implying that Melanie had a hand in either of the deaths, but I think he's certainly implying that she had knowledge. You can go, Jay.
Tammy's health. That's the same discussion that took place supposedly on the Saturday between times you were at the seminar for the Firm Foundation, right?
That would be the best of my recollection, yes.
And Chad mentioned to you during that so-called Saturday visit that Tammy would be passing sometime in the future, right?
Yes.
And you were aware that Chad had made that revelation well before he ever met Lori Vallow, right?
I heard that he had, but I'd never heard it before.
And what I'm having some difficulty with is that he's telling you that his wife is going to be passing sometime in the future, and yet he also tells you contradictory information suggesting that she's just healthy as can be, right?
I don't know if it's contradictory, but
Okay.
saying yes.
Okay. Now the prosecutor asked you, you've never been charged with a criminal charge, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. But the day and the evening or the morning that J.J. Vallow was murdered, you and your wife were at Lori Vallow's condominium that night, right?
Yes.
Nothing else, Judge.
All right. That'll conclude testimony then of Mr. Warwick. Is the state intending any recall of the witness?
Well, that last little question makes me change my entire opinion. That he certainly
At this
seemed to
time,
be
we would
implying something there about
Yeah.
Warwick.
Mr. Warwick from the state's perspective.
Mr. Pryor, would the defense have any intention to recall this witness?
Judge, he's under subpoena, and depending on what testimony comes forward in the future, we'll have to make that decision. So we'd like him to remain under subpoena at this point.
All right. Mr. Warwick, then you're still subject to the court's exclusionary order in this case. You may be recalled since you're under subpoena from the defense, so you're not permitted to watch any trial testimony or discuss your testimony with anyone else until that time, all right?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. You can go ahead and step down, and then we'll have another witness called once the state's ready.
Yeah, me either, Ashley Oaks. Ashley Oaks.
Say we call Brandon Boudreaux.
Attorney.
Oh,
Boudreaux. This is a good one.
Brandon Boudreaux. Buckle up, buttercups.
Ashley had said, I don't know how the defense attorney is doing this whole trial himself. Yeah, I was saying that.
Or affirm the testimony you're about to give.
Huge amount of shit to go through.
By the way, while my camera wasn't
Sure,
working,
yeah.
I was able to get a new sound effect for Pryor, and that's this one.
Okay, drunker man. Okay.
Although it would sound better if he did that instead.
Okay.
All right, now the witness has been placed under oath. I'm just going to inquire. The court does have an exclusionary order. In fact, Mr. Boudreaux, have you observed any of the trial testimony in this case since it began?
I have not.
All right. Have you talked to anybody else about the testimony they've given in trial?
I have not.
All right. Mr. Wood, then you can proceed with your direct examination.
Thank you, and Your Honor. Before I do, I apologize. I should have asked for this from the court earlier. If I could be handed State's Exhibit 9.
Okay, we'll get that to you.
My name is Brandon Boudreaux, Brandon. Boudreaux is Boudreaux.
Mr. Boudreaux, are you married?
I am.
Are you on a first or second marriage?
I'm in my second marriage.
I want to ask you a few questions about your first marriage. Who were you married to?
Melanie, she was Cope and then became Boudreaux.
And in your marriage with Melanie Boudreaux, did you have any children?
I did. I had 4.
And, what are their ages?
14, 10, 8, and 7.
And how long were you married to Melanie Boudreaux?
I was married to her for about 10 years.
Right. And you mentioned earlier that her maiden name was Cope.
It was, yes.
And are you aware of her current last name?
Pulowski.
What year did you marry Melanie?
2008.
And during that time, did you have occasion to meet her family?
Yes, I did.
I want to specifically ask about, did you meet the Cox family?
Yes, I did.
And who were they in relation to Melanie Boudreaux?
They would have been her birth mom's family, extended family.
And who in that family did you meet?
I met Janice and Barry Cox, Adam Cox, Summer Shiflett, Lori Vallow, and Alex Cox.
And so what was Lori Vallow's relation to Melanie Boudreaux?
She would have been Melanie's aunt.
And what was Alex Cox's relationship to her?
He would have been her uncle.
So they were your aunt and uncle-in-law?
Yeah.
Did you spend much time with Melanie's family?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time together.
In what capacity would you spend time with them?
We spent holidays together. When they lived close to us, we probably see each other once a month. When they were more distant, we would travel to each other's houses and stay for a week or two at a time. And then we do trips together. We went to Disneyland a lot together.
And I asked that kind of broadly about her family. Did you have occasion to spend much time with Lori Vallow and Charles Vallow?
Yeah. That Lori and her kids and my kids, we would go to Disneyland a lot. We would hang out a lot. We did a lot of things together. It was just kind of part of our lives.
Okay. And I said Charles Vallow at that time. Was Lori Vallow married to Charles Vallow?
Yes.
And how well did you get to know Lori and Charles?
I would say pretty well, very well.
And you mentioned your family spent time together. You said you went to Disneyland?
Yeah.
And would you spend holidays together?
Yeah, often.
Would your children spend time with her children?
Yeah, my son Braxton was very good friends with JJ. They kind of bonded, and my daughter as well, right?
And how old was Braxton as compared to JJ?
He's a couple years older.
And were you aware that JJ had some special needs?
Yeah, JJ had autism. Everybody who was around him, it was easy to tell. Early on, when he was younger, he was nonverbal for a while, and so he had like all this energy, but he didn't know how to use it. So you just had to be prepared for that. You set your house up for it when he'd come over to our house, or when you went to Lori and Charles. They spent a lot of time making sure that it was a safe place for him, and that everything was kind of handled for that. And then as he got older, he started learning how to talk, and he could say things. And similarly, he would rephrase things over and over. When he wanted to play with my son, he'd always say, go to Braxy, and he called my daughter Fridays instead of Bridie. So Braxy and Fridays. But
and so you said Braxton was a was a good playmate for JJ.
Yeah.
Did your family spend time with Tylee Ryan?
Yeah.
Tell me about your relationship with Tylee Ryan.
She's a good girl. She was, I knew her from when she was little and then all the way up into being a teenager. And so she was a normal teenager. You know, she had her moments where she just wanted to sleep in late and no one to bug her, watch too much Netflix, and other times where she'd open up and she was sweet, and you know, got to know the real Tylee. So you got a little bit of both.
And did she interact with your children as well?
She did, yeah. Often would babysit them, or she was a little older than my kids, so she would naturally be kind of more of a, she had good motherly instincts, you know, with them.
Did you ever observe Tylee with JJ?
Yeah, she was very protective of him.
And did you know Colby Ryan?
Yeah, I do.
Speaking of Tylee, did you yourself have any special sort of religious connection to Tylee Ryan?
I did. I baptized her.
Okay. And when you baptized her, what church was that in?
In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
And so to your knowledge, Tylee and her family were members of that church?
Yes.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about Melanie Boudreaux and Lori Vallow. Did you have occasion to observe their relationship?
Yes, I did.
And was that over a span of years?
Yes.
What was that relationship like?
You know, Melanie's mom died when she was young, and she had an awesome stepmom, but I think she also looked a lot to Lori as a mother figure. So she, in our marriage, at least, she was very easily influenced by wanting to do things. That's why we went always to Disneyland with Lori. It was just kind of, she always wanted to be like Lori and spent a lot of time looking for her acceptance.
Okay. And you testified that you indeed spent a lot of time with them.
Yes.
Did you know Charles Vallow?
Yes.
Did you have a relationship with Charles Vallow?
Yeah, we had a really good relationship.
Tell us about that. What made that a good relationship?
We just had similar personalities. I think both of us, we loved what we did for work. We loved owning businesses and selling. And he was very much a producer mentality type of a person. And besides that, I think we both loved our faith and had a lot of gratitude that we had. You know, I think of us spending time just talking about how grateful we were to have our families and be in a position where we were in life.
And you said you had some common ground in business. What did you do?
I worked I built a direct TV sales organization, and he owned, he did life insurance.
And you'd mentioned traveling to each other's homes. Where did that happen?
It depended throughout, you know, that 10 years is a long time. And so they moved, they never owned their houses. They rented, and they moved a little bit more often. And so they lived in Hawaii for parts of the time, and we would travel out to Hawaii to see them. Other times they lived blocks from us in Arizona. I lived in Arizona throughout that whole time.
Okay. And would they sometimes stay at your house when they came back from Hawaii?
Yes, yeah. When I was first married, Lori actually came up and stayed with us in Utah as well when I had a place there.
And yeah, I believe you mentioned that you would spend holidays together sometimes.
Yeah, often like Christmas, Thanksgiving, major holidays, we'd end up meeting at somebody's house and doing it together.
Do you recall the last Christmas that your family, the Boudreaux family, and the Charles and Lori Vallow family spent together?
Yeah, it would have been 2018.
And was that a typical Christmas?
No, it was different.
Why was it different?
In 2018, our families were changing. That particular Christmas, I wasn't as aware of everything that was going on. But when we went there, when you spend that much time together all the time, you don't have to say anything. You just know from each other's body language. And when you show up places, when you do things, it's just, you always feel welcome. You feel loved. You feel close. It's like you can pick up right where you left off. And that Christmas, when I was over at Lori's house, there just felt like a lot of distance. There was, and usually just the family. It was just like the Coxes and the Boudreaux. And that Christmas, there was someone named Melanie Gibb who was there. Who, she was a stranger to me, so it was kind of different to have a stranger at Christmas. And there was really not very much conversation with me, and a lot less focus on my kids and the kids that Christmas.
So when you say less focus from who?
From Lori.
And how was her interaction with you and your family different than before?
Yeah, Lori was pretty doting. When my kids would come over, she would make them feel loved. She would just try to spoil them with presents and attention, and that was kind of her way of letting people know that she noticed them, and that didn't happen that Christmas.
So it was markedly different.
Yeah.
Did you observe Lori and your wife Melanie at that party?
Yes.
Do you recall what their interaction was?
I remember leaving afterwards and talking to my wife about how it felt different, because it felt so different, and her telling me that nothing felt different at all. So I would say that she felt like it was fine and normal, and it didn't seem to her like it did to me.
Okay. Around this time, were you and your wife active in your church?
Yes.
And when I say active in your church, did you regularly attend church meetings?
Yeah, usually every Sunday, unless there's something going on.
And had your family and the Charles and Lori Vallow family, had you ever shared religious activities with them?
Yeah, like I said, I baptized Tylee. We talked about church openly amongst us.
Around that time, so we're talking about the end of 2018, did your wife's activity in religious events change?
Yeah, in the fall of 2018, earlier in my marriage, she just didn't love going to church. It wasn't her thing. I liked going to church, so I was kind of the advocate. I would push it a little more. But in the fall of 2018, she got very excited about religion and going to church, and she started talking about how she set this goal that she was going to go to the temple every single day.
Okay. And so around the fall of 2018, her attitudes appeared to change.
Yes.
And you said she wanted to go to the temple every day. What did you think of that?
In our faith, it's going to the temple is definitely something that's important to us. It's a way to kind of to go through a process to remind yourself of promises that you make to God. It's kind of ritualistic, but for me, it's a great thing to do in moderation. I might go once a month, and I think that's kind of a normal thing for a person. If they set a goal, they go once a month and just kind of remember, hey, I committed to God to give my life to certain principles. But when it's pretty rare for someone to go every day, it's a lot, especially for a mom with kids at home and a lot of other things that we had as responsibilities. And so it was surprising, I think would probably be the right word. But also for me at the time, I wanted to be supportive. I wanted to show that, I could meet her where she was and help her try to figure things out.
And just for clarity's purpose, in your faith, is going to the temple the same thing as going to church? What most people think of as going to church?
No.
What's the difference?
Going to the temple is something we do once for ourselves. That very first time to make promises to God. It's like being baptized. We go once for ourselves. We make promises to God. And then each time you go afterwards, you do it for someone who's passed on, but it's something that's kind of viewed, like I said, it's maybe a once a month thing, or going regularly is healthy, and I think a good part of anybody who wants to find a rhythm for their religion. But going every day would maybe be something somebody did if they were retired and they just had nothing else to do.
But going to the temple is not your regular Sunday services.
No, we go to a regular Sunday service every Sunday at a church building.
Thank you to clarify that. And so this was, I think you said in the fall of 2018 that these changes started taking place.
Yes.
In addition to this daily temple attendance, what else changed in your wife's religious demeanor or attitude?
At that time she started going to these things that she was calling firesides, but weren't things that I would call a fireside.
Okay, so let's clarify that. In your church, if someone says fireside, what do you normally think of?
So inside of our faith, there's a leader of like a group of we call it a ward. So like a group of people who live in a certain geographic area. And so inside your ward, that leader's name is a bishop, and him or one of the other people, like the counselors in the leadership group, at times they might, besides going to church on Sunday, they might set up a meeting that they think might lift us up or encourage us spiritually, and it might be outside the normal times you go. And so they usually do them in the evenings, and they call them firesides. That's something that, you get together, it's under the direction of the church, and ideally it's uplifting. It's something that's going to bring you closer to, your commitments you made when you're baptized to try to follow the Savior.
Okay, and you said that Melanie Boudreaux, and there's multiple Melanies in this case, so I'm going to keep referring to her as Melanie Boudreaux, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
And so Melanie Boudreaux, she started going to what I believe you testified, what she called firesides, correct?
Correct.
And were these different than what you would normally call a fireside?
Yeah, so I kind of just described what I think of as a fireside, but she was just going to people's houses, and they were doing meetings that weren't under direction of anybody from the church. And oftentimes they were focused on things that aren't things we talk about normally in church. Some of them were just...
What kind of things?
I didn't go to them, so I can't say what exactly was talked about, but I can share what came back from them, which was what made me concerned. She came home one time and wanted to get like $10,000 worth of food storage all at once because she was really concerned about the end of the end of times coming, the end of the world coming. And it just didn't seem very practical to me, and then there was other focuses that she would come home with. She had a fascination with like Jesus Christ and did he have a family and why was James's name the beloved? A lot of early Christian, early church things. And so I would share perspective, but I was also I kind of tried to share with her my perspective on. I served a mission for my church for a couple of years, and I saw some people who fell away from it, and I shared something that I had noticed in that process that those people got really focused on not the core of believing in finding faith in Jesus Christ, but they got focused on things that were really far away from that, and it led to them falling away from the core of their faith.
And you said that you never attended any of these, can I use the phrase alternative firesides?
Yeah, that's fun. No, I did not attend any of them.
Did you ever attempt to?
I did ask if I could, mostly because I wanted to see what was going on in there so I could give her better perspective, but she let me know I wasn't welcome at them.
So she didn't let you go with her?
Yeah, she told me I wasn't welcome to come.
Do you know if Lori Vallow was at any of those firesides?
Yeah, I do. She was the one who invited her to them initially.
Okay. So coming back to winter of 2018, if it's fair to say that your testimony, your wife's religious fervor has changed, and you had this awkward Christmas party. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Did the situation, and you testified that your relationship between the Chad and Lori family and your family was close. Did the situation between your family and Charles and Lori's family change around that time?
A little bit after, right after, in the new year, beginning of the new year, there was a period where Lori, she did send a message to the family telling them that her accusation was Charles was cheating on her, and that because of this, she locked. She took all the money out of their bank account. She stole Charles's truck, changed the locks on their house. It was very irrational to me.
And when was this?
It would have been like the end of January of 2019.
And how did you respond to that situation?
Initially I didn't even know about it. I think she called everybody, but my phone was blocked from Charles, so I couldn't hear from him at all. I found out later that Melanie must have blocked him in my phone, but
just to be clear, Charles Vallow's contact was blocked on your phone.
Yes, and I didn't do it, and the only other person who had access was my wife.
Okay. And so you were talking about how you reacted to this situation of, I guess you could say, a breakup between Lori and Charles.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one when you're that close with people, and everybody in the family kind of got drug in and involved in it because it was messy. As far as Charles really didn't want it to happen. He wasn't looking for it. He was trying to make sure it didn't happen. He was sending us as a group regular emails to try to contact us and work through it and try to communicate, because Lori just kind of cut him off after all that. She just stopped talking to him. She actually left him with JJ and just disappeared for a while.
Do you know where she went?
I don't.
Right. But she didn't take JJ with her?
No.
Do you know how old JJ was at the time?
I can't remember right now. It's been a long time.
But he was still a young child.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't leave JJ. JJ had to be watched all the time. You couldn't leave him alone. He was, when you're watching JJ, it's your whole life. Like, you have to plan everything around it. I mean, just for him to come visit, you have to plan everything around it.
And you stated that the whole family got drug in. Did your wife take a position on taking a side?
Yeah, when it happened, I wanted us to not take a side, and divorces are just messy, there's nothing anybody can do about, when you've been together for a long time and you're trying to separate both emotionally. gonna have a hard time going through the process. And so my encouragement was that we didn't pick a side. We just loved them both, and then made sure that the kids knew that they had somewhere where they could be safe, and our house could be that. But Melanie just kept saying how she was uncomfortable with Charles, and she didn't.
Microphone, please.
We're getting into some hearsay, and Judge, I've been patient, but the narrative is getting a little lengthy now, so I'm going to object on narrative and hearsay at this point.
Sustained.
Okay. Did Melanie Boudreaux demand that your family take a side?
Objection, hearsay.
That's a request, Your Honor. A request is not hearsay.
That is overruled. You can answer.
Yes, she did.
And did you respect Melanie's wishes on that?
I did my best.
And was that because she was your wife?
Yeah, I wanted to stay married. It was really important to me.
And so we've kind of moved on now to the beginning of 2019. Is that accurate to say
Yes.
in these events that you're talking about?
Yeah.
Did you see Lori Vallow much in early of 2019?
Not at all.
Okay. And I believe, I don't want to misstate what you said. It was your understanding that she had left.
Yeah, I don't know where, because I didn't have any contact, and it didn't seem like anyone else did. But
All right. Did you see Charles Vallow at all during that time?
I did a few times. We would agree for JJ to come over, play with my kids, and so he would come over.
Okay. And Lori was never with him?
Never.
And was she with JJ?
No.
But Charles would come over and bring JJ to the house.
Yeah.
And what would JJ do at your house?
He would just come play with my son. He would, they play video games as long as he could keep his attention on it. Sometimes he'd just bounce from one thing to another. He'd be all over the house. Braxton would kind of keep his eye on him and play with him. He knew JJ was special, and so he kind of kept that assignment. Before JJ came over, you'd prep it. We put like little stoppers on the top of all the doors out or whatever to make sure he would try to sneak outside. And then he's so fast that you had to be prepared. So you'd pre-plan some of that stuff before he came over, make sure it was ready for him. And then, but Braxton would kind of keep his eye on him, and I would usually at that time, I'd sit and talk to Charles.
Okay. What would you speak with Charles about?
You can imagine someone going through a divorce they didn't want to go through. He was pretty, I don't know what the right words are, distraught, sad, overwhelmed. It was a lot for him.
Are you aware if at any time there was an attempt at reconciliation between Charles and Lori?
Yeah, I think Charles tried to reconcile. I actually think he stopped at the divorce. He always said that he was going to make it work.
Sustain.
I'm going to move forward to the summer of 2019. Did you have an occasion to take a trip to your in-laws' house?
I did, yeah.
And do you recall when that was?
It would have been in June of 2018.
Do you recall the exact date or approximately when in June?
The week of June, like 23rd, 25th, something like that.
What was your purpose for going to your in-laws?
My wife's younger sister was getting married.
And while you were there, did anything out of the ordinary happen?
Yes.
What was that?
A few things, but the first thing that happened is my grandfather died of a heart attack.
Okay. And were you expecting that?
No.
And so you're at your wife's family's house when you got the news?
I was actually with my parents. We took my family, went to, decided to go to church with my mom and my dad, which is they still live in the same place where I had left for my mission on. And we were actually just sitting in the pews right before church started. And my dad got a phone call, and he never gets up and takes his phone calls in church. So he got up and he left. And he came back and he waved us all out. Said,
Your Honor, I apologize.
Go ahead. It's sustained, as you're saying.
It's just some foundation, so I can move on at this point.
Very well.
Did you have any conversations about your grandfather's death with your wife, Melanie?
yes. After he passed away, I waited a day or two. My mom called me to tell me when the funeral was, and I told her that when it was and that I wanted us all to go, and she told me she wasn't going to go.
Sustained, and I'll strike that final part of the response of what was said.
All right. At this point, were you still at your in-laws' home?
Yes.
And did you have a disagreement with your wife over whether or not to attend your grandfather's funeral?
Yes.
Did you want to go to your father's funeral, your grandfather's funeral?
Overruled. You can continue, Mr. Wood.
Yes, I wanted to go to my grandfather's funeral, and I wanted my family to.
While you were having this discussion with your wife, did that escalate into any other type of conversation?
Yes. It escalated into a conversation in an argument that didn't make any sense to me.
What was it about?
Well, she started bringing Lori into this argument, which had nothing to do with what we were talking about. She said that God had...
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. It's hearsay.
You're right.
Response, Mr. Wood.
Your Honor, I believe it comes in for the effect on the listener, not for the truth of the matter.
Well, I think just the specific statements are hearsay beyond that, so I'll sustain the objection.
All right. Without saying the words your wife used, what was the context of that conversation?
We had an argument about whether or not I hacked Lori Vallow's computer.
Did your wife accuse you of hacking Lori Vallow's computer?
Yes.
Did she request that you admit that you hacked into her computer?
Yes, she said that I had to.
Judge, I'm going to object again.
Your Honor,
Sustain.
Your Honor, if I might briefly argue, a request is not hearsay.
Well, a request, if it's calling for specific statements of the party not here for cross, would be hearsay. So I'm not saying you can't answer, but in terms of specifically what was said, that's where the ruling stands.
All right. Thank you. So that accusation was made.
Yes.
What was your reaction to that?
I just felt really frustrated. I had no idea why we were even talking about it. It had nothing to do with what I was trying to get through to her and what I was trying to talk about. It was like this thing that didn't make any sense to me.
Without going into any specific statements, did Melanie Boudreaux provide any context for why she thought you'd hacked into Lori Vallow's computer?
Judge, it's going to call for hearsay.
Overruled.
Can you ask that question one more time?
Yeah. Without providing any of the statements she said, did Melanie Boudreaux provide any context for why she thought or why she was accusing you of hacking into Lori Vallow's computer?
ask that one more time, I want to answer it properly.
Sorry, it's probably complicated.
Yeah.
Was there any reason given why she thought you had hacked into Lori Vallow's computer?
Judge, response calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
No.
Just a bare accusation.
Yeah.
To be clear, Mr. Boudreaux, did you ever hack into Lori Vallow's computer?
No.
Did, in this conversation, did Melanie Boudreaux inform you of anything that God had revealed to her
Judge,
in relation to this divorce?
Judge, I'm going to object. This is leading.
On leading, that's overruled.
Yeah, the argument continued to progress, and I guess she actually specifically said that God had told her.
Judge, I'm going to object. It's hearsay.
It is hearsay.
There you go.
Your Honor, that this statement is not coming in for the truth of the matter. It's just simply to show
Pause it
the
real
argument and the effect.
So whenever you hear a judge, so when he overruled that first objection, and if you listen to judges very carefully, and Boyce knows his shit, like Boyce knows the rules of evidence very well. I think that he has been spot on with almost every single objection ruling that he's made during the entire trial. When he says something to the effect of overruled as to whatever in that situation, I forget what the objection was. He was implying that there was a proper objection, but that Pryor hadn't made it. So then when Pryor does it on hearsay, that's when he sustains it. So like you can always get little tips like that from judges when they rule on objections. So he thought that there was an objection there, but that Pryor didn't make the proper objection.
On the listener.
All right. And again, for that purpose, it's not hearsay, but any specific statements where they're not subject to cross, I'm finding are hearsay.
Yeah. Without saying the specific statement she said, what did she accuse you of?
Of being gay and of hacking her Aunt Lori's computer.
And what was your response to those accusations?
I mean, all of the emotions you would think you'd feel after 10 years of married to somebody. Disappointment, frustration, a lot of grief, a lot of grief.
Did you have any idea that she would make an accusation of homosexuality against you?
No. I mean, I had a thought that it might happen because of something Charles had said, but no, I never would have believed it.
So you have, is it fair to call it an argument?
Yeah.
How did it end?
I mean, it took a long time. It started in the afternoon. It went past midnight, and she went to bed. I just stayed up troubled all night.
Okay. Did you send a text to Charles and Lori that night?
I did. I was really frustrated about this whole thing being involved in my relationship with my wife. So I sent it.
It's becoming a narrative. It's non-responsive.
Overruled.
So I sent a text to Charles and Lori both, telling them that if my family was broken up and my marriage ruined, it was on them.
Did you ever hear from Lori in response to that?
No.
Yeah. Did you hear from Charles in response to that?
I did.
When approximately was that?
A little bit later, a lot was going on at that time, so I couldn't say like a specific time, but I ended up talking to him on the phone.
Would you say this, is it fair to say we're still in the late June?
Yeah, it was like the next day, probably at like in the evening.
Jay, pause it real quick.
And what was the?
So Jay, do you know number one, could you imagine being Brandon Boudreaux? So like you're 10 years into your marriage, 4 kids, think you're happy, and then your wife starts getting like Svengali'd by her aunt to the extent where she's shutting him out, making bizarre accusations, seemingly trying to destroy and end the relationship, and then gaslighting the fuck out of him. And at this point in time, like he has no idea that the exact same shit is happening to Charles Vallow from Lori. So like in his mind, he's putting it on both Charles and Lori because he has no clue that Lori's doing the same thing to Charles. So this is a really interesting part of the narrative, because this is when he becomes aware that Charles is very much in the same place that Brandon is. So we're going to be getting into that. I still don't know. I felt more empathy for Brandon than anyone except for probably Colby, because like Brandon was like just collateral damage in this thing. And obviously this tale gets even worse for Brandon as we progress through it. But I'm still not seeing the connection to Chad. So hopefully we're going to get, he's going through the entire story from beginning to end. Hopefully they're going to be able to make some connections to Chad here.
Right. All right. Let's see, folks.
What was that conversation?
And thanks for being here, everybody. We appreciate it. Hit that like button if you haven't already. Please get us in the algorithm.
Yes.
Like.
He just apologized to her.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. It's calling for hearsay.
Sustain.
What did you say to Charles?
I just apologized to him. Told him I was really sorry about not being there more for him, because now I was feeling like I know he must have felt. And he just, he was really gracious.
Was that the last time you spoke with Charles Vallow?
It was.
After Charles Vallow died, did you have any contact with Lori Vallow?
No, I did not.
After Charles died, did you have any contact with JJ Vallow?
No, I did not.
And after Charles died, did you have any contact with Tylee Ryan?
No, I did not.
After Charles Vallow died, what happened with your relationship with your wife?
We got divorced.
When did that happen, approximately?
We started the divorce right after my grandfather's funeral, but it takes a little while. So we got a mediator right after and signed all the documents. And I moved her into a rental house, and then I think it finalized in October.
Okay. In that process, was there any the home that you and Melanie lived in, did you sell it?
I did.
And did she move to another location?
She did. I helped her get a rental home.
Right. And did you move to another location?
I did. I ended up getting a rental home as well.
Approximately when did you get that rental home?
I got it. I found out the house was sold like the end of September. It looked like it was going to sell. And so I went and found a rental home at that time.
All right. And Where was, uh, don't go into specifics of neighborhoods, but what city was this in?
Gilbert,
Gilbert.
Arizona.
Okay. And is that where you had been living the last several years?
Yeah, I moved back.
And so did you, you located a property that, was it close to the home that you and Melanie had been living in?
Yes.
And why was that?
I wanted to make sure my kids had stability. I was really worried about all of the changes.
And were you sharing custody with Melanie at this time?
I was.
What was the situation between you and Melanie like at this point, at the end of September, beginning of October of 2019?
It had changed quite a bit. Since June, she just stopped talking to me. We could text, but barely. There was no connection anymore, and she's very cold to me.
At this point, did you know where Lori Vallow was?
No.
Is it fair to say that probably wasn't the first thing on your mind?
Yeah.
But you hadn't heard from her?
No.
And you hadn't heard from Tylee or JJ?
No.
So we've been speaking about this, your situation with your wife, Melanie Boudreaux, at the end of September, beginning of October. Did anything happen at the beginning of October of 2019 that affected that situation?
Yes.
What was that?
On October 2nd of 2019, someone parked in front of my house and shot at me and tried to kill me.
Okay. Let's talk about that. October 2nd, you said?
Yes.
Let's go to the kind of the beginning of the day. How did your day start?
I woke up. I had all my kids at my house, so I got them ready for school, and then I got them out the door. We did our normal stuff: breakfast, prayer, and then I dropped the older two at school, and the younger one, the second youngest, at a preschool, and then I dropped my youngest at Melanie's house.
Right. After you dropped your kids off, where did you go next?
Then I went to the gym.
This is all in that same area, Gilbert, Arizona.
Yes.
And after the gym, where did you go?
Then I drove back to my house, and as I was driving around, my house is a couple of houses in on the street, so I made a left in onto the street. And as I was driving, I noticed a few things. My house, the driveway, there was like a Jeep parked right on the edge of it, where I would normally turn in, and there was nothing parked there usually. I'd only been there for a few days, but so far it was always, there was this van there, and like the Jeep was parked with its like bumper basically on the van. And it just looked at that place. It had a Texas license plate. There was no tire on the back of the Jeep. And you know how when you open and close a Jeep, there's like little tabs on the window. Those were sitting on the outside of it. So it just looked awkward, just was awkward enough that I noticed it right as I turned around the corner.
Okay. And so you noticed the Jeep. Did you notice anybody inside of it?
I couldn't tell if there was anybody inside of it. This all happened in such, imagine coming around a corner, driving a couple house lengths. So it all happened very quickly. And then the window opened up, and I saw a gun and a silencer. And I would my window shattered. I heard a bang, all kind of in the same amount of time. And my immediate thought was just, I'm getting shot at. And I, instead of turning my wheel and into my driveway, I just pushed the gas and drove straight forward.
What happened after that?
I drove to where my street ended, and there was a turn, and kind of as I came up to that part, I remember grabbing my phone, calling 911. Talking to the operator, I went and pulled a little bit around, and there was like a little community pool there, and I kind of parked in front of it for a second. And there's like a loop between my street and the street above me, and I remember I could see on that loop, I saw that Jeep start to come around the corner, and then it did a U-turn and went the other way. And I think I started to follow it at first, and then I think
Were you on the phone with 911 during this time?
Yes, yeah, the whole time I was talking to an operator.
And you just said, if I understand correctly, that you started following the Jeep.
Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking at the moment, but
did you notify 911 that that's what you were doing?
Yeah, and I believe they told me to pull around and park in front of my house. So I did, and then they told me to wait for police, and they came shortly thereafter.
Okay. I believe you testified, correct me if I'm wrong, that you had only been in this house for a few days.
Yes.
How many people had you told that you were in this house?
Almost nobody. It would happen very quickly because I wasn't supposed to be able to get my kids as soon as I was, but my wife had agreed to let me have them sooner. And so I had moved everything out of the house that was selling to get them in so I could have them for that weekend with me in my house, because I would do anything to keep my kids with me. And
so when Melanie Boudreaux knew you were there, had you told anybody else?
So I had to tell her when I got the place. I hadn't told anybody else, but my neighbors had seen me moving and they helped me move. So anyway, was just the ones that lived by me there.
So had you told any other friends and family yet this was your new residence?
Just hadn't had time to tell anybody yet. It was so quick, and then I had my kids.
So did law enforcement show up?
Yes.
And did you notify them of what had happened?
Yeah, I told them everything that I could.
And when you said your window had shattered, is that your driver's side front window?
Yes, the bullet had lodged up in like the door frame, which I didn't know in the moment, but later you could see where it had hit. And it was just right above like where my head would be.
Right. And did you describe the Jeep to law enforcement?
Yes.
And did you follow up with law enforcement after that?
Yes. When you go through something like that, you spend all day, it feels like, with law enforcement. It takes a really long time. So at some point, like, a detective came over and I talked to him. And then later, as I was thinking through everything and talking with other people that were close to it, I realized that I felt really confident that the Jeep was Tylee's Jeep.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Were you aware that Tylee Ryan had a Jeep?
Yes.
Did you know how long she'd had it?
Charles got it for her during all of this, when he was in Texas, he'd gotten her Jeep.
So when he was in Texas, was that in 2019?
Yes.
Okay. And you had seen that Jeep?
Yes.
Right. And so I don't want to put words in your mouth. Your testimony is that as you reflected on it, you thought more and more that this was Tylee's Jeep.
Yeah, I think I might have called Zach Cox and talked to him too, and he might have had the same thought, and we both were just like, that's got to be the Jeep.
Who is Zach Cox?
Adam Cox, Lori's brother. It's his son. He had lived with Lori and Charles for a period of time, and with me. He's 18, 19 at the time, so he just kind of out on his own. He was working for me. I had given him a job.
Did you take any other steps to identify that Jeep?
Yeah, I was an insurance agent at the time, and previously Charles had given us the VIN number, and so I just gave that VIN number to law enforcement.
Okay. And okay, so you had the VIN number for Tylee Ryan's Jeep.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the number you provided to law enforcement.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, you had that because you were insuring that Jeep.
I didn't end up insuring it. He had just given us all the information, Charles had.
Okay.
So.
Your Honor, I don't know what time the court wants to take the mid-morning break.
This is probably about good time to do it, Mr. Wood.
Okay.
All right, so we will take our mid-morning recess. Remind the jurors, please, not to discuss the case amongst yourselves on the break or with anyone else. We will return to the courtroom here in about 30 minutes, maybe a little less if we can.
All right, please.
All right. I hate it's on my freaking. I think I figured out the problem. That's what I've been focusing on the whole time, and now it's. But Bob, I still think I agree with you. Like, where are we going to bring in Chad into this? None of this has anything to do with Chad that they're doing right now. I don't think. Are you muted, Bobo?
I am. Yeah, it's tough to figure. I mean, I get why they want him in there, but I mean, it just doesn't seem to have much to do with Chad. You know what I mean? I mean, even getting to when Alex, tries to kill him, it's still like they've got to make the connection. I mean, there's still more to come, obviously, with the testimony. But I'm very curious as to when they're going to make the connection. I mean, just in general, as far as I'm concerned, Jay, the only thing that I've seen to me during the entirety of the trial that has been very damaging is the interview or the conversation between Chad and his daughter when he's back, when he's in the back of the squad car, wherein he seems to make some, consciousness of guilt statements. But again, Alice and I were talking about this off stream yesterday after the stream. To me, if I'm prior, what I'm leaning into is I'm saying, okay, I'm 100% going with that Chad became aware after the fact that Tylee and JJ had been killed, and that all Chad's involvement was, burying the kids or helping assist or allowing for the kids to be buried in his backyard after the fact, which, is like a desecration of a corpse type charge. That's what I'm doing if I'm prior, because then that kind of gets to, how would Chad not know that they were on his property? Where's Chad at when all this is burying? How does that, how do you explain the wind direction on the day that the kids are likely buried on the property? All those questions that the jury might have. So I don't know. I mean, we're going to
see this note from Charlie Patton on the screen. Well, the video surveillance of Chad and Lori dropping off the spare tire of Tylee's Jeep, which is what I think they're leading up to. That will be interesting if they get into that. I don't know if you saw this, Bob. Stacy Reed sent you a $5 holler. Bob, you are definitely worth it at least $5 because I get all my housework done listening to your content.
Oh, thank you so much, Stacy.
And Meg P says to check your PayPal, Bob.
Oh, Meg P and Lee Lou gifted 5 Defense Diaries podcast memberships. Thank you so much, all 3 of you, for your incredible generosity. I really appreciate that. So, while we're taking the break, let's. And I get that a lot of people detest Pryor. I think they don't like his demeanor, but there's 2 separate things. Like, you can hate a lawyer and still think they're doing a good job or an effective representation, or you can hate a lawyer and think they're doing a shit job. Like, I think that a lot of people detested Poot and Griffin and Murdoch and didn't think that they did a very good job at trial, both, right? but I think that you can also dislike a defense attorney in particular in this case and understand that he's effectively doing his job. And from a defense attorney's perspective, I'm just telling you, he's effectively doing his job.
I think so. I agree. I don't like him. I think he's doing a good job. Poot, I didn't like, and he did a bad job. Poot actually read the hearsay law live in front of everyone and realized that he was wrong about something, and that was hilarious. But time for I talked about this. It's time for some fan mail. So let's.
We just got a letter. We just got a letter. We just got a letter. Wonder who it's from.
So what I'm going to do?
That was so delightful.
It's going to go over here. Here's the first one. Here's the first fan mail. If you're from Bob's channel, you may not know I do this sometimes. I share some of the comments I get on the tubes of you and other social media. Some good, some bad. Let's start with this one. Oh God, this is from big user NB1UN1N1F. Oh God, I can't stand the talking during the trial. It was nonsense and it ruined my experience on your podcast. Thank you, user NB1. Thank you so much for that feedback. You could have just not said anything and just not watched again, but you decided to let us know about that. Let me know about it. Thank you, user NB1. All right, now this is a good one. This is one of my favorite, Bob. This is what I posted this to twitter.com. This is one of my favorite ones to date. Jay, if you would improve your speech, that would be helpful as I find it hard listening. Thanks. Thank you, Gary Bradshaw, 2975. I wish, if only I could just change the words that come out of my mouth and my just entire personality, maybe you would like this show, but I guess not. Thanks. You're welcome, Gary. You're welcome. I'll work on it.
Yeah, and I piled on with Gary there with you. I forget what I said, but I added something equally ridiculous. And I didn't understand. Was he talking your speech? What, that you swear or just the words that you're using?
I think just my general aura as a human being on this planet. He doesn't like. I think it was possibly. I think this was during my stream where I was reading the divorce documents. Maybe it was that. I don't know. Yeah, society page. So say, Jay, could you just be a completely different person? That would be great. Thanks so much. All right, I think I have a good one here. Let's see what this one is. Oh no, this is another one. This is another good one. Lori Owens, 8510. You are so obsessed with Wendy Adelson. Get some help. Yeah, I mean, Lori, I do follow her case. I do a lot of videos. Some might call it obsession. Sorry, Lori. Also, you could have just not watched. You keep watching it. Lori. You don't have to watch or comment. So, and
is it possible that Lori Owen is in fact Wendy Adelson?
It is possible. It is possible. Yes, that's what Meg P says. That could be Wendy. I mean, she spelled the name right, Wendy with an I, which would lead to believe that maybe it is her because a lot of people will not spell it with the I. I remember someone commented the second that Donna spelled her name with an I is when her life started going bad. All right, but I think I have a nice ones now. Let's see what this one is. These are the good ones now, and these are for me and Bob, I think, because these are recent ones. Joliba 7. This is more entertaining than any Netflix show I've watched in the last 5 years. Good stuff, Jay. Thank you so much. That's a nice one. I don't want to. And honestly, the majority of our comments are good. So, but I just think it's funny to highlight some of the bad. So, thank you for saying that.
I love when we highlight the bad. And look, I mean, the reality in life is that you can please some of the people some of the time. You can please all the people sometime. You cannot please all the people all the time, Jay.
Yeah, absolutely. And this one's for both of us. This one's for both of us. This was from today, and I really like this one. This is not sure how to say the name, but Replay Crew from Switzerland and new viewer. Really enjoy your coverage. You're both hilarious. Thank you so much. Hello in Switzerland. Hello to Switzerland and our worldwide viewers. We really appreciate that.
We do. And Jay and I both have the approach that, look, we are dealing with oftentimes very, very dark subject matter material. And Jay and I, while we're never making light of the tragedy which is befallen victims in these cases that we're covering, we also see the value in trying to add a little levity to the situation. I mean, it's like some of this stuff is tough to sit through, and I think it's healthy for us to laugh. I think that it's healing to the mind, and I think that it's a good counterbalance. And when I practiced law for all those years, man, dealing with just like misery all the time, on a daily basis, just living in misery, I mean, because it's what it is. The way to kind of combat that in terms of mental health is to try to not make light of the situation at all, but just try to.
But there are moments that happen in the trial, or if it just so happens that the murderous defendant or alleged murderous defendant has a huge potato head, we're going to do stuff like this. I mean,
that's a virtual planetoid.
It's hilarious. And you know what? Chad has a giant head.
If his head blocks, it looks like his head is blocking the light. We're going to call that out in the courtroom. I mean, it's just
Chad's head is blocking the sun. I'm sorry, but you know what? We're going to have to note it and make a huge amount of fun of it. That's facts.
It is. We're going to do
He'll
that.
be crying himself to sleep tonight on his huge pillow.
And this is a good one. I think this is on one of our videos. I'm not sure, but this is a good one. It says, great video. This is the most fun to listen to or fall asleep or to drive to. So yeah, we love when folks will just listen to us like in the car, or like, I know you have that, like you talked about with your podcast, people listen to it all the time.
Yeah.
For me, that's kind of a new thing because I'm visual, obviously YouTube, but it's funny about it because people will refer to my show as a podcast, which I've never considered it a podcast, but I think sometimes people like just interchange podcast and YouTube.
They do too. You would not believe how many comments I get on my from my podcast listeners who do not enjoy or do not watch YouTube videos or engage with YouTube at all. And like I got a comment last night. They're like, because what we do is we ultimately convert our lives to podcast episodes because we realize that there's podcast listeners that just listen to pods. And, I got a comment last night, like, hey, because like Darren had fallen behind in converting our Delphi coverage. So people were listening to coverage from could have been 2-3 weeks ago, a month ago. And they were like, hey, could you let us know that you're converting, what was alive into a podcast episode and kind of give us a date? And which was a good point, which was actually a good point. So I think moving forward, I'm going to have Darren do that. Like when I think he's caught up, but in terms of like converting that, yeah, some people just like the audio, but even with YouTube, you can just listen to the audio.
Yeah.
We have tons of people that are walking around in their house, cleaning, taking care of their business in their house, and they're just listening to us yap, and listening to the testimony. So, and like one of the challenges for Jay and I when we're doing a dual stream on Restream, which is why when we're carrying the Karen retrial, we're going to alternate first and foremost because we want all of our subs and all of our fam to be in one chat. We think that will be great. I see it and I love it. I love to see people jumping in between both of our chats, but I think when we can get everybody in one chat, you guys will love it. We're all the same fam here, and you guys will realize it when you're all in the same chat. But also it makes it easier for because it's hard. Like if I want to pop in and say something real quick, and I do feel bad interrupting because I realize that the primary purpose of what we're doing is that people want to hear the testimony. They want to hear the trial. So we're not intentionally doing that, trying to speak over what's going on there. But when we're alternating, like if I have a portion where I want to be able to say, hey, explain kind of what's going on legally, I'll be able to kind of pause it. Because it's tough for me to do it otherwise, because Jay may not be looking at our private chat or, text messages or something of that nature. And sometimes it's timely, if something pops up and if I don't let Jay know that I want to talk about that, I'll probably forget it as we progress through the testimony. So look, there's going to be little warts on this because we're dual streaming, but we think that the benefits far outweigh whatever detriments that there are.
I don't even think. I think it was just that the comments I got wasn't that like people love the commentary because that's what they're here for. I think it was that we weren't pausing and we were talking a little bit while it was still going. So I'm going to be very cognizant of that. Like if there's something you want to ask Bob or Pops, I'll pause it rather because even if we're just like saying thanks for the super chat, sometimes we forget like like the court will still be going and like if we're going back and forth it like. But I people love the comment, at least that I see. I think people want to hear the commentary. Someone asked with the Karen Reed, for folks who do not know the situation with Karen Reed, they have 19 jurors, but they're not like apparently they're not like 19 strong jurors. Like I think both realize that there might be an issue with a couple jurors.
Yep.
So I think they might even think that there might be like 4 or some amount of them that they're like, we picked them, but they might not be good. So tomorrow they're going to finalize. I think they want 20.
Right.
They're going to finalize it, and then there's no court on Thursday and Friday, so it looks like
weird. Like I don't know why. I don't know why they're doing that. Yeah. So I had read an update and I tweeted it this morning. So it sounds like what they're going to get to, Jay, is they want to get to 20, but after they get to the 20, they still want to pare it back down to the 16. But as you said, that they have concerns about maybe a few of the juries that are already in in the selected 19 that they may have problems with. So they want to get it up to 20 only to go back and pare it down to 16 so that they have 4 alternates. They don't want to, from what I'm gathering, they don't want to have a total of 8 alternates sitting there. Because I'm hearing various things and at least what the defense said is that it wasn't so much that they had heard about people that were trying to get onto the jury and were not being truthful during the voir dire or the voir dire, however you want to pronounce it. I pronounce it voir dire. Allie pronounces it voir dire. But, it was more that the length of the trial could create issues for them. And you've got circumstances where you don't want to have somebody that's sitting in on a trial that in week 7 is like, I gotta go. My life is now taken precedent over this trial. I hate to do it. So, you try to handle that on the front end as much as possible. And especially in a trial where that it's going to be very, very lengthy. It's like, again, I know I keep talking about that Made in America, the OJ thing, but those folks were literally, Jay, sequestered for a year in a hotel with no contact with their family, with no ability to contact anyone, couldn't talk to the other jurors. I mean, it was like essentially being in a juror prison for a year. I mean, can you imagine that in this?
You have like kids, like smaller kids, or even that's. I don't know if you see this comment from TJ Bits Bob. I've listened to all of the Anthony Garcia episodes done so far and started the Casey tapes this past weekend, and they're so addicting to listen to. Let me throw up Bob's link tree in the top here, the code. Make sure you are checking out the podcast, or you can even scan it right next to Bob's shoulder there.
Yep, right there. And just so you know, y'all, we just dropped a new Garcia episode early morning hours last night on the regular feed. It was available for a couple of days to our Patreons or our patrons. But yeah, new Garcia 54 is out. I haven't even tweeted it yet, but I will at some point. I've been trying to figure that out. Oh, we were talking about that rancher case yesterday. So apparently mistrial. So yeah, after they had tried diligently to come to some kind of unanimous decision on Friday, and then they asked for the weekend. They came back, went another 7 hours yesterday, and the 4-person of the jury sent a note out and said, this is not going anywhere, which tells me that was typically when you have just an inability of the jury to be able to feel like they're ever going to get there, that it wasn't just one juror, that it was probably like a pretty heavy split. I'll be anxious to see what that is if that ever comes out. And from what I know, because it's an interesting case, but from what I know is that they are going to take until Monday. The state is going to take until Monday to see whether or not their intent is to retry the case, because it's a tough case because the state really does not have any kind of direct evidence against this George Kelly guy, in terms of, because they could never find the projectile, meaning that they like within the body itself, and then when they searched, they couldn't find, so they couldn't match it up as to whether or not he was even the person who actually shot the victim, because it was from a great distance. So kind of interesting, but I wanted to give everybody a heads up on that.
One thing I wanted to thank folks is that video I did with Julia Cowley and Never a True Word Jack. It got like 10,000 views the first within the first 24 hours. And I messaged, because I could tell like Never a True Word has YouTube, so I could see he's getting more subs. So like it always makes me happy when I have guests on, if I could somehow help them, because I'm not paying these people and they're taking their time. They have jobs, they have podcasts. And I asked Julia, and she was like, yeah, I noticed that we like had more downloads. Normally I get it when I post the podcast, which I think she does today or tomorrow, but I noticed. So I wanted to thank you guys for doing that. Check out that podcast, The Consult. I promise you, it's Julia Kelly. She's a former FBI profiler. She was the profiler on the case that when they got the Golden State Killer. So like it's a really good podcast. So thank you everyone who went over there and like gave it 5 stars and downloaded it and listened to it. It helps. It just,
everybody,
I appreciate
everybody involved. And I went back, replay crew, and watched it last night. It was great. It was really great. It was like, not that you don't have other great lives, but like in terms of like kind of the content, like in and of itself, it was fascinating.
It's just to get like the patterns of people, like people, and I had one person, and I might have been Wendy again, who just kept being like, this has been debunked and blah blah. It's like I don't care what you say, if you don't believe like there's certain patterns and behavior like that people can study and kind of glean and get information from. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, Julia was literally worked at the FBI, and that was her job. I mean, and like
Jack parsing every, like like as lawyers, we parse every single word that everyone says. So I love what he does. I love what he does. So, because that's literally what he's doing. He's parsing every single word and really trying to find what the actual meaning is behind it. Because when you have people speaking just in a situation where they haven't been able to think out what they're going to say, you're going to have people say things that you can pick apart, or that give you a clue as to what they're really thinking, or if they're lying. And I just thought it was great. It's got like that kind of like Sherlock Holmes vibe type shit to it. So I thought it was great, man. I really did. So if people haven't checked that out, y'all should really be. It's a great live, and I actually want to get both of them on too. Like I've never had Julie on ever, and I'd like to, because she had had the consult out years back, and then they had quit making the pods, and then she decided to bring it back. And she just does great work. And like I know a lot of like former feds that kind of do what she does, and like she's one of the best out there. She's just super thoughtful, and I'd like to actually get her take on a couple of things, like namely kind of like I want her to dig into Gacy with me.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
She'd be because I'd like her to hear some of the tapes, and because I've often thought that there was, that Gacy had help, that these two guys, Cram and Rossi, were complicit, and I've always thought that they probably should have been tried as well. And I'd love to see her take on that. And I'd love to hear her take on whether or not she thinks that Richard Allen fits the profile, of somebody who would do something as heinous as what happened to Abby and Libby. I think I'd really like to hear her take on that as well. So yeah, it was a great one, dude.
Thank you. And I'm curious your thoughts, Bob, on the part where, and this came up in the trial in all of her testimony, Wendy's, but it was so interesting when and we found out from Julia during the live that this is something that law enforcement is trained to ask. When they ask Wendy, what if the question was like, I forget the exact wording, but like, do you think that whoever did this should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law? And then she's like, yes. And like, even, and I think he says, even if it's your family. And she's like, well, then I'd have to think about it. It was such an, and Georgia Kappelman, who's the prosecutor, brings it up each trial. And she denies it. Like, she kind of like, so I thought that was interesting. And by the way, folks, I'm hoping I sent Julia and Jack Wendy's first testimony from her first trial, so I'm hoping maybe we can do something with that. But what do you think of that? But like, was that interesting to you? Because that to me
fascinating to me, fascinating and super telling.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. It's like those are those little things that you've been kind of picking apart in order to substantiate. Look, they need to make the move on her. That you think that there's enough there. So I think ultimately, but a lot of it kind of has the feeling of this trial, though. You know what I mean? Where like common sense is dictating to us what went down. Like common sense says, obviously she's a part of it. Obviously she was probably the one behind it all. I mean, who benefited more than her? Right. So, but like, again, it always boils down to, is Georgia going to feel like they have enough if you get a jury that's filled with folks that have no idea about the whole sordid tale, and they're just sitting there hearing the story come out, because in that one, the question becomes, if Wendy's charged, is she testifying? You know what I mean? It's almost like you have to think like there's no way. I mean, they would be able to just destroy her on impeachment stuff, like depending on what she says at that trial. And I don't think that there is any way in hell that Chad Daybell is testifying in this trial. Like as we sit here right now, because remember, like 99% of the time, whether or not we are going to put a defendant on, which we never want to do, which I know is counterintuitive. I know that people, like I've said this before, that people don't understand that if you didn't do something in your mind when you're sitting on your couch and you're like, man, if somebody ever, accused me of murdering somebody or committing a crime and I didn't do it, I'd be screaming from the rooftops. There's no way they'd be able to keep me off the stand. But then when you kind of understand the pratfalls and how easy it is to get something taken out of context, or if they don't like your demeanor, there's just so many different things that can go wrong with you testifying on a stand. So, I mean, maybe in a world which we start seeing some powerful evidence, and I've seen some very good comments in here, and I'm sorry we didn't get to them, in terms of what people are anticipating is going to come up, that will kind of stick their claws into Chad a bit more than we're seeing now. But like where we're sitting right now, I do not anticipate that Chad will be testifying at all.
Well, and Lori Hellis made a good point when I had her on. She's like, very much, part of his culture of the Mormon LDS. But like, if his attorney is like, listen, you don't do this, he's not going to like fight him over it. He's going to be like, all right, like that's my role to accept what he says. He's like, so it was an interesting insight she gave.
And before we jump back in, so Ashley Oaks sent me in our chat an update. So apparently they did there was, I don't know if they pulled them, but in that Kelly trial, it was 7-1 not guilty, which thank you for that comment, because that explains to me the defense very much wanted the jurors to continue to deliberate. Now I know why, because they were so close to getting an NG, and the state had said, we want you to declare a mistrial. So it was a 7-1 not guilty count. Interesting. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
All right, Mr. Bailiff, if we could have the jurors return, please.
You will bring the jury.
Your Honor, if the state and defense could just briefly confer with you.
Yes.
Charlotte had asked while we were how I got in contact with Never a True Word. Jack, it was kind of the same way with Bob. I saw him tweeting. I saw some of his stuff. I'm like, this is really interesting. And I just DM'd him. I'm like, hey, man, would you want to come on and do a show? He was not familiar at all. If for folks who don't know, he's Scottish. He's from over the pond. He was not familiar with the case at all. And I think that's why those videos have done well, is because both of them are coming in completely. Well, Julia said she watched the Dateline, but pretty much not like me, where they've watched all like so
Right, they're not entrenched. They don't
Right.
have a position. They're completely coming in objectively without any kind of preconceived notions. I mean, that's who you want, you know.
Right.
I mean, because then you know, it's like anybody that listens to me that doesn't fully listen to my content and like they don't understand what my actual position is, thinks that I'm completely biased in terms of Richard Allen's guilt or innocence in Delphi, and that's not what it is. My thing is that the guy has to have a fair trial, and everything that has happened in that case procedurally has been a roadblock from that happening, which has nothing to do with his innocence or guilt. Now, that being said, I felt like that PCA to me is weak, but that and a stick of gum will get you nothing. You know what I mean? It's like, that's why we go to trial. Like I always wait until trial. And it's like, same with Karen Reed, man. You know, it's like I can see a world in which either thing happened, and you know they're both plausible to me. And I see people just going nuts on both sides of it, calling people idiots if they believe one or the other. I'm like that. Like, look, man. Like, there's gonna be experts that are going to testify. That are going to answer certain questions that, if those questions are answered in a certain way, are going to definitely sway my opinion one way or the other. And until that happens, I'm not willing to say anything, period. It's that simple.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ruth says, is that a Judge Newman soundbite? Yes, a lot of our stuff, like Bose, when we talk about being Bose and like that's where it all started. Orange Capri Suns on my that's how I for folks who don't know, maybe on Bob's channel or my channel that are new, I knew nothing about true crime until Shannon had me watch Low Country on HBO. And I started tweeting the Murdoch trial, and that's where all this starts. So yes, this is good old Judge Newman, one of the best judges that I think we've watched.
He was great, and like what people loved about him was his demeanor, you know, because he just has that austere kind of Southern hospitality, very even keeled.
Okay, we can have the jurors brought in.
Boyce here. This guy's a hell of a jurist. Like what you want from a judge is that you want a judge to understand the rules of evidence, because remember, if they're not the trier of fact, meaning it's not a bench trial and you have a jury impaneled, that is their job. Their job is to understand, have just a lockdown knowledge of the rules of evidence. And this guy has it. Like, I mean, you could just tell. I mean, he like I have said, I don't think that he has missed on one of his calls on objections at all. And I think he's been very, very fair as to what the rules of evidence are. I don't think that he's got a position either way. And that's all you can ask for from a judge. Right. That is exactly what their job is. So,
and I think right, they both do a good job. They both, and Judge Boyce and Judge Newman were like, they control the courtroom. If like certain, like if there's an objection, he says overruled, and they're like, and you're just like, overruled. Let's go. Like some of these judges are like, all right, sidebar again, sidebar. Like, right. It's like, you know, both the attorneys know, and the attorneys in Newman's court knew, like, he made his ruling, like, we're moving on. They weren't like,
and that goes like directly to his confidence and his knowledge of the rules of evidence. You know what I mean? Like, he knows that no argument that's going to be made at sidebar is going to sway what his decision was, because he's confident that he made the right call on it. And I really enjoy him on the bench. Like, it just makes for a very smooth trial.
Absolutely.
We're not getting like the constant barrage of the shit that we hate, you know.
Absolutely.
And it's like,
so much better to watch a trial like this when they're just pausing for 10 minutes every 5 minutes. They're pausing for 10 minutes. Yeah, I totally agree. All right, folks, if you're coming in late, we are continuing Brandon Boudreaux's testimony. We thank you for being here.
All right, we're back on the record.
Hit that like, and as we always say, share it, tell your friends. You guys are kind of Jack does a great thing on his video. He's like, you guys are my advertising, and you guys are our advertising. Like, tell folks.
On CR 2221-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell, continuing direct examination of Mr. Boudreaux, who's still under oath for testimony. I'll remind the witness the jurors have returned, and Mr. Wood, you can continue with your direct.
Thank you. Mr. Boudreaux, when we left off, we were discussing an incident on October 2nd. And again, I don't want to put words in your mouth. It sounds like you had testified you had come to some opinion as to which Jeep was involved. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And you provided the VIN number of Tylee Ryan's Jeep to law enforcement?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask State be allowed to publish State's Exhibit 9A.
As previously admitted, correct?
Yes.
Yes, you may publish it.
What's a
Mr. Boudreaux, do you recognize that
picture of the
vehicle?
Jeep here?
Yes.
Do you know who that vehicle belonged to?
We called it Tylee's Jeep. I believe it was Charles's. I think he's the one who bought it.
But you were aware that Tylee Ryan drove that Jeep?
Yes.
Okay. Is that the Jeep that you saw on the morning of October 2nd, 2019?
Yes.
So as you provided that VIN to law enforcement, did you do anything else in regards to that shooting?
That day or when specifically?
Well, let's start with that day. Did you do anything else? Or let me ask this, strike what I just said. When approximately did you give law enforcement the VIN number for Tylee Ryan's Jeep?
That day.
Okay. And did you take any other steps or did you provide any other information to law enforcement?
I just shared with them who I thought did it and why.
All right. At any point after that first day, did you do anything else looking into the shooting that took place?
Yes.
What did you do?
After you go through something like that, it was pretty traumatic. It took me a little bit to realize that that a resolution wasn't just going to come really quick. Like the police weren't just going to arrest someone, a day or two later, and and then it would all be resolved. So I started trying to figure out things I could do to help assist law enforcement into finding who shot at me. That included hiring a private investigator, going back through any information I had, like old emails, the ones that Charles had sent me.
Okay, so let's talk about that. You said Charles had sent you some emails. When had Charles sent you emails?
He sent me emails. So when he and Lori were going through the divorce, he was sending out emails to the family with things he was concerned about, because he was very concerned about her mental health, and with things that pertain to this belief set that she was building.
Okay. And so that was during the period that Charles and Lori were separated. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And were you the only recipient of those emails?
No, he sent it to all of our family. So any of us who he considered family. So like Janice, Barry, Zach, Adam, all of us.
And so it's your testimony, you started going back through those emails?
I did, yes.
And what was the purpose of that?
I thought maybe if I knew more about what these beliefs were, that now apparently to me it seemed my wife had and Lori had, that I could maybe I could try to figure out more of what was going on, because everything was so bizarre.
And these emails that Charles sent, what was the nature of these emails? Was it a narrative that he was speaking about?
Well, in them I found that a lot of the stuff was being sent by a Chad Daybell, who I didn't know.
Okay. And when you say stuff, what type of stuff?
There was like these documents that talked about like light and dark spirits, and it was like rating my family, like and myself, and then my extended family, like Lori's family and things like that. There was invitations to some of these firesides and stuff like that, and information about them that I didn't consider firesides, things like that.
Okay. And did you provide those emails to law enforcement?
I did, yeah.
And was Did you see your own name written in those emails
I did.
with some type of? Did you understand what that was like? You said some type of rating. How did you know it
Judge,
was
I'm going to object. This is becoming leading, and we haven't had a sufficient foundation to tell us what emails, date, time, place, year.
It's sustained as leading.
Okay. You had testified that you saw your name.
Yes.
Was there anything written next to your name?
At the letter D.
Okay. After you provided those emails to law enforcement, did you do anything else?
I wanted to figure out more, so I got into Google and searched for Chad Daybell because I didn't know him. So I wanted to see more information about this person that was sending the information.
Right. And what did you find?
When I typed his name in, an obituary popped up for a Tammy Daybell, and something inside of me was just shocked. I was just.
Did you provide that information to law enforcement?
I did, yes. I called up my detective, Ryan Pillar, at the time, and I texted him.
So just to clarify, you said my detective. Was that your private investigator or a detective, law enforcement detective?
Sorry. Yes, he was the detective at Gilbert at the time that was assigned to my case.
Right. As this process went on, did you ever learn that Tylee, Ryan, and JJ Vallow were missing?
Yes. We were worried about it early on, and I often told Detective Pillar my concerns.
Did you ever learn whether or not JJ and Tylee Ryan had been found?
Did.
I'm sorry.
I did. Sorry.
And do you remember when that was?
I got a call June 9th of 2020.
Where were you?
At my parents' house.
Do you remember who called you?
I don't. I just remember somebody from, I think, Rexburg calling just to let me know that they had found what they were pretty sure was the kids.
Okay. Once you got that information, what did you do?
The next day was my wedding, so I was getting remarried. So I got married, and shortly after that, I just felt like I needed to go up to Rexburg. I don't know what for. I just felt like I should, so I drove up there.
When you were in Idaho, did law enforcement ask you to do anything as it related to JJ or Tylee?
Yes, they asked me to identify JJ.
And do you recall where you were when that happened?
Where I was when I identified JJ?
Yes.
Okay. It was, I think, outside of Pocatello at an FBI location.
And do you recall the date?
June 11th or June 12th.
How did they have you identify him?
They showed me some pictures of him deceased. They asked me if that was JJ, and I said, yeah.
Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
All right. Cross-examination.
Another witness you should tread lightly with. But we
Yeah,
know
well, particularly because Brandon's in the process of weeping right now.
yeah. Get ready for these, although this sounds better.
Okay.
No, I'm okay. We can go.
You mentioned you had contact with Charles Vallow and Lori Vallow quite frequently. Is that right?
Yes.
What was the frequency with which you had contact with Charles Vallow from when you first met him to the time of his death?
It varied by the years. Sometimes when he lived close to me, I'd see him often. I could see him every week at sometimes, and then there was other times where he traveled for work, so I might not see him for a couple months. And they also lived further away, so sometimes I wouldn't see him as often.
They were nomadic. They never owned a house. They would just constantly rent. That's what I recall. I think you testified to that. Is that right?
I wouldn't use the word nomadic, but they definitely moved more often than I did.
Okay. And approximately the date you first met Lori Vallow?
It would have been in 2008. I was driving with my then fiance at the time from Texas to Utah, and we went through Phoenix, and I met the Cox family at that time.
Okay. And would you agree with me that Lori Vallow and Alex Cox had a very, very close relationship?
It was on again, off again. There was times where it was very close, and there was times when they wouldn't see each other very often, but they knew each other very well.
Well, are you aware that it seemed that every time Lori moved, Alex would follow her and move to where she would move to?
Not always. Yes, sometimes that did happen, but other times no.
And more often than not, though?
It depended. There were times where Alex lived with in Arizona with us, and Lori left to Hawaii for a few years. But then there was other times, I agree with you, where they all moved from Texas to Arizona together and things like that.
And on the subject of Hawaii, during the time that Lori left JJ with Charles for that 2-month period, and I believe that was January and February of 19. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, it might have gone into March a little bit too, but yeah, that time frame sounds right.
And during that time, are you aware that she was residing and staying in Hawaii?
I don't know where she lived at that time. I didn't have any contact with her.
Okay. And at the time you were married to her niece, so you guys didn't discuss Lori's whereabouts as being in Hawaii for 2.5 months.
Well, my wife said she didn't know where she was.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if that was true. I just know that's what she said.
Okay. Now, would you agree with me that Tylee and JJ had a very, very close relationship?
Yeah, I mean, they were brother and sister, so I would say they were close.
Well, more than that, isn't it true that for all practical purposes, Tylee was really like the second mother to JJ and caring for JJ?
It depended. I mean, she was a teenager, so there was definitely times where that wasn't the case. But there was also times where she was a nurturer for JJ. I mean, she loved him, but she was, like I said, she's a teenager, so that was not her primary responsibility for sure.
But did you observe JJ looking at that in maybe a different perspective, that he relied on Tylee for a lot of things and things that maybe Lori wasn't providing for him?
Objection calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Did you observe anything to that effect?
And JJ was special needs, so I don't know that I could have identified that JJ could have. I mean, JJ needed every adult or anyone who was there to help him. You know, that's what he needed. And I definitely remember during that time when Charles had him, he missed his mom a lot. Charles brought it up in those same emails a lot, and it broke your heart.
And after Lori got back from Hawaii in March, early March, there was an attempt at reconciliation.
Yeah, they did try.
And at that point, did Charles confide in you that he actually was convinced by Lori to make Lori the beneficiary of his life insurance policy again?
Charles didn't talk to me about his life insurance policy. Charles did not talk to me about his life insurance policy.
So he never discussed with you finances or anything like that?
We talked about financial stuff, but he never talked to me about his life insurance policy.
Okay. So you're not aware that the life insurance policy was placed in Lori Vallow's name during this reconciliation period then, correct?
I would have no ability to testify to that.
Okay. You brought up the subject of Melanie Gibb. And my recollection of your testimony is that you found it unusual that Melanie Gibb was there for Christmas of 2018.
Yes.
And I can't recall if you had said that they seemed to have a close bond at that point. How would you characterize their bond at that point?
Who's they?
Melanie Gibb and Lori Vallow.
Okay. Yeah, it seemed like they definitely had a closer bond.
And are you aware of when Melanie Gibb and Lori first met?
I can't testify to when they met.
Did your wife participate in these gatherings in August, September, and October with Melanie Gibb and Lori?
I believe so.
Yeah. And these gatherings in August, September, and October of 2018 were what you described as these fireside chats?
And I think they went past October. I think they were in November as well, in December.
But they started in the mid to early summer of that year. Is that right?
I can't say when Melanie's very first one was.
Okay. And were you aware that Melanie Gibb was the organizer and planner of all of these events?
I can't testify who planned them.
Okay. It wasn't your wife who was planning them?
I don't think so. It would have been without my knowledge.
Okay. And you found it unusual that Melanie was there at your Christmas holiday for what would be deemed a family holiday. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you happen to recall seeing a gentleman by the name of David Warwick at Christmas that year as well with Melanie?
No.
Okay. Now, you touched on a little bit about the temple, and I don't want to cover this too much, but in terms of the temples, what I don't understand is when someone goes to the temple in your faith, they do that as part of the marriage process in the beginning, right? To sort of the bond. It's a bonding, or you bond with each other, or I'm grasping for the word seal. You're sealing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the word?
There's a few things that you can do at the temple. You can go and do something called baptisms for the dead, where you can.
Well, I want to talk about. We'll get there in a minute.
Okay.
And I don't know that we need to spend a lot of time on that, but I'm as part of the marriage process. You seal with each other as part of the marriage process when a couple first gets married, right?
Yeah, we have something where you can be sealed to your spouse for time and all eternity, is what we call it.
Okay. And regardless of what happens, you're sealed, even if it means divorce or otherwise, right?
No, not quite. But
okay.
I mean, we make promises to God.
Okay.
And with those covenants, if you keep those, we believe He gave authority to the person who seals you to be able to stay married even after you die.
Right.
But obviously, with any covenant, if you don't keep your promises to God, then you can break that and it's no longer sealed.
Right. And that's something that's important in the LDS faith, is to keep your covenant to God, right?
I would hope for most people, if they believe in God and they make a promise with him, that they would want to keep it.
So and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but the sealing is also a process in which you, and I'm trying to be careful about the way I phrase this, so correct me if I'm wrong. You stand in for somebody else who has passed away or is no longer alive, and you baptize them as a proxy for them. Is that kind of what goes on there?
Sealing or baptizing? Because you said baptize.
Well, sealing. There's a sealing process about being a proxy for someone who's passed on, right?
Yeah. So if I can be sealed to my wife here living, and that's something that I want to do, then I have that option. And for those who passed on, we practice in proxy is what we call it, but we practice the process of doing that for them so that it could be done here on earth, so that if it's something that they wanted, they could have that option in heaven.
So when they pass on, you're helping them move on to heaven. Is that really what that's all about?
The process would be up to them to choose, right? But yes, we're going through the process here in behalf of them.
Well, you mentioned the baptism then, and that's what I'm a little confused about. So you baptize people who have passed on as well.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to beyond the scope of direct.
Overruled. So, Mr. Pryor, there needs to be some relevance as well. So it's narrow.
Well, Judge, I think I'm going to move on. This was more curiosity than was anything else. So
Okay,
let's move on.
Not relevant if it's just curiosity.
It's just, like, what is that? I'm just curious. Well, then fucking go on Google after the day, sir.
Google.
What the fuck?
Yeah, let's move
But
on.
remember, out of everybody in this courtroom at counsel table for the state and the defense, John Pryor is the only non-LDS person in this courtroom. The judge is LDS. Everybody on the state is LDS. Pryor is not LDS. I saw the comment, how doesn't Pryor know? Because he's not LDS.
Fucking dude, watch the documentary, dude.
And we also can't assume that every member of the jury is LDS. Like, LDS is very complicated. When Allison and I were doing the Lori Vallow thing, I told you, man, we were relying on people like in our chats that are clearly extremely knowledgeable about it. And we were saying it like in our podcast, like, if you guys know, tell us. We have to learn, because we wanted to be knowledgeable about it, so that we didn't sound like idiots talking about it and and we still got things wrong, but we would always correct it because it's complicated. There's a lot of ins and outs with LDS and the tenets and everything that goes along with it. So, if Pryor doesn't have an understanding of whether or not, every member of the jury is LDS, which it could be. Like, somebody put out a stat that 96% of Rexburg, Idaho are LDS, which is mind-blowing, really, when you think about it. So, yeah, right. But I can see how it would be irritating. This isn't the time for him to learn about all the tenets of LDS religion. That's for sure.
Let's see, folks. Let's see if he's curious about soaking. Maybe those are his next questions. Who knows? Let's see.
Can you tell me a little bit about soaking?
What's a jumper?
Higher side tissues. Have you ever heard of an organization or a group preparing the people?
I have, yes.
And that's an organization that sort of caters to people of your faith about being ready for the second coming. Would that be fair?
I don't know if I would agree with that statement, but so I guess I would say no for me.
Okay, well, not for you, but in general, for people who are participating in those preparing the people rallies or conventions or firesides. Really, the theme is what to do after the second coming, or preparing in case of an emergency, something of that effect. Would that be fair?
I've never been to something, so I can't testify as to what they believe.
Okay. Is that something that would be considered outside the realm of your faith, or not something you should be looking into as part of your faith?
I mean, I think each person has to decide what they're interested in and what things apply to their faith.
But obviously, if there are some things that you're engaging in that are contrary to the faith, then you don't get to choose that, right?
The church can occasionally come out, right? They, like any organization, and say, hey, these are things that don't apply to our faith.
So having visions, have you heard about people who are blessed with the ability to have divine visions and be able to see events that are occurring in the future?
I have never had any visions, and I don't know anybody who I personally believe that I know personally who's had a vision.
Okay. And then having seances, like conducting a seance, is that something that your wife was doing as part of this back starting in the summer of 2018? Is she engaging in seances?
I can't testify to that because I don't know.
Okay. Did she talk to you anything about conducting vibrations and having vibration movements as part of these seances?
She didn't talk to me about that.
Okay. And the discussion of light and dark, you talked a little bit about Chad Daybell and that there was some discussion about light and dark, right? But
yes.
That's not necessarily inconsistent with your faith. Your faith is talks about it in a number of your publications about light spirits and dark spirits. Isn't that true?
We don't talk about light spirits and dark spirits. No.
No, there's nothing in the faith that talks about light or dark spirits, right?
Nothing in what I've been taught. I mean, it's a large faith. There's a lot of information. So
okay, so you're just not aware of whether that's taught in your faith or not. Is that fair?
I've been going to my church for a really long time, and I've never experienced it.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Well, that was quick, and I got a $10 from Flower Goddess. Hello from Miami. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Flower Goddess coming through with the $10 holla.
That was really quick cross there, folks. So
it was. But again, like,
where's he at? What is he?
Why does he have to belabor it? Because
redirect.
Did Chad ever
redirect, Your Honor?
All right. Are there any?
Oh, no redirect either. So there you go.
The witness perhaps can be recalled by the state or the defense.
Not by the state.
Not by the defense, Judge.
Okay, that concludes your testimony, Mr. Boudreaux. Thank you for appearing today. You're released from any subpoena. You may go ahead and step down.
Whoops, I said.
And Judge, could we have a quick sidebar just on an issue?
Yes.
Oh, sidebar.
Yeah.
I wonder if I wonder what this will be about. So they're done with this witness. I wonder,
So Pam says, yes, Bob. Chad came in with emails from Charles Vowell to Brandon.
Officer Ryan Pillar, Your Honor.
Call next witness.
State calls Officer Ryan Pillar, Your Honor.
Back to, was this the officer that
LLAR.
Stacy B, 610. Well, it depends on what obviously the religion is being brought into the case. You know, that rule 610.
Solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Does not allow for a witness's religious beliefs to be used in order to destroy their credibility on the stand. So if you can kind of particularize your question a bit more, I mean, it clearly, like, the underpinnings of religion are the entire basis of this case. So clearly that's in here. So yeah, Stacy, just kind of pinpoint exactly what your question is. I'll try to answer it.
What the hell?
Who they call now that you're under oath? These trial proceedings,
Officer Pillar. I don't know if this is the guy that investigated the shooting of the Jeep.
Have been live streamed and open to the public. Okay, and have you discussed with anyone else the testimony inquire on direct?
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Pillar, can you please state your full name and then spell your last name?
Yes, it is Ryan Pillar. Last name is spelled P as in Paul, ILLAR.
Where are you currently employed?
I'm employed with the Town of Gilbert Police Department.
And what state is the Town of Gilbert in?
It is in the state of Arizona, Maricopa County.
How long have you been employed by the Gilbert Police Department?
I was employed February 2007 and have been with them for a little over 17 years.
Have you had any other law enforcement jobs prior to your experience with the Gilbert Police Department?
No, ma'am.
Can you briefly describe your training that you've had to become a police officer?
When first hired, I attended an 18-week Arizona Law Enforcement Academy, followed by an 18-week field training. And then I was a patrol officer for 9 years, where I received hundreds of hours of continuous training to include arrest procedures, state laws, firearms training, basic investigations and interrogations. In August of 2016, I lateral moved to our special victims unit within our criminal investigations division, where I was a detective and I received training in interview and interrogation, crime scene. I spent a week-long training with child crimes investigations. I also went to a week-long forensic interview training. In August of 2019, I lateral moved to our violent crimes unit, which is focused on investigating robberies, homicides, and violent crimes. I received another 5-day training with homicide investigations and interviewing techniques, as well as crime scene investigations. I'm now back on patrol work voluntarily and working within the school program.
Michelle J says, Bob, what's Julie's channel? Julia Callie, if you go to truecrimeconsult.com, that has all her info. Truecrimeconsult.com.
It's within Gilbert, Arizona.
So your current job title is you're an officer with the Gilbert Police Department.
That is correct. I'm a police officer.
What was your job title in 2019?
In 2019, I was a violent crimes detective.
Can you briefly describe your job duties as a violent crimes detective?
As a violent crimes detective, we investigated crimes that are related to violence, death investigations of any kind, homicides, and robberies, anything that would potentially lead to a death or a serious physical injury sustained to a victim.
Were you on duty as a violent crimes detective on October 2nd of 2019?
Yes.
Did you respond to an attempted shooting of a gentleman named Brandon Boudreaux that day?
Yes, I did.
Approximately what time was that?
About 9:13 in the morning is when the initial call for service kicked out.
And did you go to a location?
Yes, 3875 East Phelps Street in Gilbert, Arizona.
And whose residence or what place was that?
It was soon learned that it was the residence of Mr. Brandon Boudreaux.
When you arrived at the scene, what was your role?
Upon arrival to the scene with fellow detectives, I took the primary investigator role, which is the lead detective for that particular investigation.
And when you're the lead detective of any investigation, what are your responsibilities?
Initially, it is to task fellow detectives with their duties, and then as the primary investigator, it's to interview the involved parties, in this case, the victims and witnesses.
Are part of your duties as a lead detective to make determinations about next steps and directions that the investigation should go?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, when you arrived at the scene on October 2nd of 2019, did you make contact with Mr. Boudreaux?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you talk to him without getting into any narrative or any specific statements he made to you? Did you discuss the incident with him?
Yes.
Based on your discussion with him, were you able to ascertain what had happened?
Yes.
Did you have any other discussions with anybody else at the scene or in the area?
Yes. Part of the duty, again, was tasking other detectives with canvassing the areas and speaking with witnesses. There was evidence at the scene to include in the roadway some shards of glass. Mr. Boudreaux's vehicle was parked in front of his residence. It had evidence that it did, in fact, sustain damage from a projectile. And witnesses at the scene confirmed a vehicle was idling in front of Mr. Boudreaux's residence prior to shooting occurring.
Okay, so let's walk back just a little bit. When you describe seeing Mr. Boudreaux's vehicle, were you able to ascertain where this shooting had occurred, where Mr. Boudreaux was?
Yes.
Where was Mr. Boudreaux when the shooting had occurred?
Mr. Boudreaux was driving his vehicle westbound on Phelps Street, approaching his residence.
And you mentioned that a projectile hit the vehicle. What do you mean by projectile?
Bullet.
Okay. And where was that bullet mark on Mr. Boudreaux's vehicle?
It was up in the A pillar of the door frame, near the windshield. The damage itself actually caused the the front driver's side window to fracture, crack, and ultimately shatter. And then there was a hole within the B pillar.
And you personally observed that at the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
After discussing what had happened with Mr. Boudreaux and other individuals at the scene, were you able to get a description of a suspect or suspect vehicle?
Yes.
What was the description that you got?
From Mr. Boudreaux and witnesses, it was a darker color or gray colored Jeep that was parked facing westbound and the eastbound lanes in front of Mr. Boudreaux's residence, or near the front of his residence. This Jeep was a Jeep described as a Jeep Wrangler, and specifically it did not have a wheel affixed to the back of the vehicle, which is standard for Jeep Wranglers to have a spare tire affixed to the back of the vehicle.
Did you learn anything about the license plate of that Jeep?
Yes. Additionally, with the color and description of the physicals of it, it was described by Mr. Boudreaux that it was a Texas license plate that was affixed to the back of this vehicle.
Based on your discussions with Mr. Boudreaux and other individuals at the scene and the description of the suspected Jeep, were you able to take that investigation in any specific direction?
Yes.
And what was that?
From interviews and the vehicle description, I reached out to the Chandler Police Department detectives because it was learned that a homicide happened in their jurisdiction in July of 2019. I'm sorry.
I apologize. Can you briefly tell the jury where Chandler is in reference to Gilbert?
Yes. Chandler, Arizona is adjacent to Gilbert, Arizona. We refer to it as a sister city. So it's right next to Gilbert, within Maricopa County.
And you described learning about a homicide that had occurred in
Yes.
Chandler. What was the significance of that homicide to your investigation?
So upon learning about the Chandler homicide, it was learned that family members of Brandon's wife at the time, Melanie Boudreaux, were present at that Chandler homicide scene, as well as a couple vehicles.
And when you say Brandon's wife, Melanie, do you know what the status of his relationship with Melanie was at the time?
His relationship with Melanie Boudreaux at the time is marriage. They were married. They were in the process of a divorce that was near finalization.
Was there anything you learned about that homicide investigation, or that death that occurred in Chandler that was applicable to this case, or the vehicle specifically that was at the scene?
Yes, the Chandler investigation learned that the decedent was a gentleman by the name of Charles Vallow, who was married to Melanie Boudreaux's aunt, Lori Vallow Daybell. Present at that scene as well was Lori's brother, Alexander Cox. It was learned that a vehicle at the Chandler crime scene was a dark colored gray Jeep with a Texas license plate that was registered to the decedent, Charles Vallow.
At that time, were you able to develop a person of interest with regard to that Jeep?
Yes.
Based on the information that you had as the lead detective, who was that person of interest?
Person of interest was Alexander Cox.
What further steps did you take in that investigation with regard to the Jeep?
From the Jeep information and the license plate that we've confirmed, we reviewed LPR hits. LPR is an acronym for license plate reader. And we were able to track the movements of that Texas license plate on that Jeep with photographs to confirm it was still on the Jeep, moving from the state of Arizona to the state of Idaho.
And did you determine what dates that had occurred?
Yes.
What were those dates?
Those dates were just prior to and after the shooting in Gilbert, Arizona.
Were you able to determine where in Idaho the Jeep had traveled from?
Yes.
Where was that?
It traveled to and from the area of Rexburg, Idaho.
And were you able to determine whether or not Alex Cox had a connection to Rexburg?
Yes, it was soon learned that he was residing in Rexburg, Idaho.
Okay. At some time, did you begin coordinating with law enforcement agencies in the Rexburg area?
Yes, once it was learned the Jeep was located in the area, we reached out to Rexburg Police Department and Fremont County Sheriff's Office. Fremont County Sheriff's Office, sorry.
At some point in time, did yourself or any of the law enforcement agencies you were working with obtain a search warrant on that Jeep?
Yes.
When was that?
The Rexburg Police Department was able to locate and confirm the Jeep was at an apartment complex in their area, and they executed a search warrant in mid-November, November 18th.
Were you present when that search warrant was executed?
Yes.
Can you briefly describe what took place during the execution of that search warrant?
Myself and a crime scene specialist flew up from Arizona directly to Rexburg. We went to Rexburg's property evidence building where the Jeep was secured. I stood by with my crime scene specialist as she processed the vehicle. Processing included taking exterior photographs, opening the vehicle, taking interior photographs, and then she collected physical evidence to include DNA swabs in areas that would have the most contact by the operator, some physical items from within the Jeep, and then collected from the back of the vehicle GSR, which is an acronym for gunshot residue evidence, because we believe this vehicle to be our suspect vehicle and the shooting occurred from outside the back window.
And what did you do with those samples that you retrieved from the vehicle?
These samples were packaged individually from each location where it was collected, and then it was ultimately impounded for evidence and then forwarded to the respective crime labs within Arizona for processing.
And did you have any more, did you do anything else with regard to the Jeep at that time?
No, once the Jeep was processed per the search warrant, it was turned over back to the Rexburg Police Department where it remained in custody.
At some point in time, did your investigation into the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux shift?
Yes.
Why was that?
Because working with Rexburg Police Department, Fremont County Sheriff's Office, and Chandler Police Department still, as well as the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, it was learned that children belonging to Lori Vallow Daybell had not been seen or heard from for quite some time.
When did that shift occur?
It occurred shortly after the processing of the Jeep. It was late November. I believe it was November 26th was when the focus really changed.
Did you take any steps on the Arizona side of things to locate these children?
Yes.
Can you describe those steps that you took?
Myself and fellow detectives began interviewing associates and family members of the involved parties. We set up surveillance to include pole cams, which is discrete cameras that are affixed to a light pole, for example. These cameras were located in locations to monitor friends and family believed to have custody of, at this time, JJ and or Tylee Ryan.
In addition to the pole cams, did you do anything else?
Contacted other family members and associates.
Yes. Were you able to determine whether or not those children were ever in Arizona in November and December of 2019?
Upon review of all surveillance and all interviews, no, there was no indication either child was in the state of Arizona.
Now, at this time in late November and early December of 2019, were you still investigating Alex Cox for the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux?
Yes.
What did that investigation look like at that time?
Gilbert Police Department, as well as other agencies, were keeping our eye on Alex Cox. With my investigation in particular, we were tracking his movements.
I apologize for interrupting. When was that?
This was in early December of 2019.
And you were surveilling Alex Cox?
Correct.
How often were you surveilling him?
It was learned that he was back in Arizona, Gilbert in particular, and we were surveying him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And in December of 2019, did you stop surveilling Alex Cox for any reason?
December 12th, 2019, yes.
Why did you stop surveilling Alex Cox on that date?
Alex Cox died on the 12th of December of 19.
After Alex Cox died on December 12th of 2019, did you execute a search warrant on his residence or vehicle?
Yes,
What day was that?
it was the same day of his death.
Did you find anything of evidentiary value in Alex Cox's home?
Yes, in his residence, he had multiple munitions and some firearms. He also had indicia to show that he lived in the residence, and ID identification, clothing items. And then he had some literature, multiple books of literature authored by Mr. Chad Daybell.
And did you find anything of evidentiary value in his vehicle?
Yes, there was paraphernalia to include holsters and ammunitions within Alex Cox's pickup truck. And there was a letter that was found also within his pickup truck.
What was that letter?
It was a patriarch blessing authored by Chad Daybell.
And who was it directed to?
Alexander Cox.
If I may have just a moment, Your Honor.
You may.
Short and sweet.
And Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness.
All right, before cross, just a quick sidebar with counsel, if I may.
Sidebarring it up today.
Real quick, just scheduling. He's asking Pryor how long he thinks he'll be. He's deciding whether or not to take lunch now.
Yeah, we're real close. Thanks, everyone, for being here. We appreciate it. If you don't know, they typically take break in about a half hour for an hour, although yesterday was a little longer break. Oh, they're back. Let's see what's going on.
All right, thanks, counsel. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there's one issue I need to address with the witness and counsel outside of your presence. In lieu of taking a full-on break, if we could just have you retire to the back hallway here for literally 5 minutes or less, we'll come back on and then we'll take our lunch break at noon. So let's just have the jurors excused just very briefly.
I wonder what this is
All
about.
right, please.
We'll find out. But one thing that we know, Pryor's not going to have a long cross. I anticipate that his cross will be done, and then they'll take lunch break, and then this witness will be released.
Okay.
Okay. Drugs are bad. Okay. Missy Bam was talking about some sriracha almonds. What?
Oh,
All right, thank you. Please be seated.
What's going on here?
Directs concluded. Just very briefly, counsel, I was reminded at a former trial in the case versus Lori Vallow, one of the Arizona officers, and I'm not entirely remembering if it was Officer Pillar, but made some type of a kind and thanked the jury or something on the way out, which raised an objection by the defense. And I thought it was perhaps at least had the appearance of impropriety. So I just wanted to inquire and make sure that no passing comments were made at the conclusion of the witness's testimony to that effect, because we're just trying to keep the jurors as impartial as possible.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's all I wanted to address, and we just didn't know a better way to do that with the jurors here. So with that, we'll just have the jurors brought right back in. We can continue with cross then, Mr. Pryor.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, so if the jurors can return.
Missy, I have not run into those. Like, I always eat the blue diamonds. I love the wasabi, the smokehouse. They've got the salt and vinegar, which, like, I happen to love the salt and vinegar ones. Where I've always liked salt and vinegar chips. So either you either love or you hate salt and vinegar, Jay. There is no in between.
Babe loves them. I hate them.
There you go. Same with us, Allie. Like, that is always my bag entirely when I bring home the salt and vinegar. She gives me side eye. She's like, "You motherfucker."
My newest thing, I love the cheddar and sour cream ruffles, man. Those are so good. Cheddar and sour cream, delicious.
All right, Mr. Pryor, you can commence with cross-examination if you'd like.
Or chips, both.
I'm with you, Steve-O.
Steve, like I was with you on the oatmeal raisin cookies from Subway, but now you've just...
Good morning, sir.
You spoke about having coordination with the folks in Rexburg, the folks in Chandler, Arizona,
Yes, sir.
you at Gilbert, Arizona. Would you agree with me that the common denominator of all of these matters is Alex Cox and Lori Vallow?
For the Gilbert investigation, Alex Cox was our primary focus, yes.
And Lori Vallow as well?
Yes, she came into play with being Alex's sister.
Right. And those are the ones that are implicated in the Gilbert, Arizona case. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And then as far as Charles Vallow is concerned, the murder of Charles Vallow, are you aware that, again, it's Alex Cox and Lori Vallow who are implicated in the murder of Charles Vallow?
Yes, for the Chandler, Arizona case.
Okay. And the evidence that you found in the Jeep were 2 of Chad's books?
No books of Chad's were found in the Jeep, no.
That's it, right?
No books were found in the Jeep.
No books?
No, sir.
Oh, okay. Judge, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, any redirect?
Okay.
No, thank you, Your Honor.
All right, is this witness going to be recalled by the state or the defense?
Not by the state, Your Honor.
No, Judge, thank you.
Okay, you're released from any subpoena. Thank you for appearing and testifying today, Officer Coulter.
Don't say thank you. Don't fucking do it. We will arrest you right here if you say thank you to the jury. Don't even look at them, sir.
That's right. We don't want any impropriety. No impropriety.
All right, before we call another witness, the court has previously provided a limiting instruction in this case, and given the nature of both this testimony and the testimony of the previous witness, Mr. Boudreaux, the court is going to reiterate that instruction, which will be included in your final instructions as well when you retire to deliberate in the case. Ladies and gentlemen, during the course of this trial, evidence will be introduced for the purpose of showing that the defendant or an alleged co-conspirator may have committed acts other than those for which the defendant is on trial. Such evidence, if believed, is not to be considered by you to prove the defendant's character or that the defendant has a disposition to commit crimes. Rather, such evidence may be considered by you only for the limited purpose of proving the defendant's motive, opportunity, intent, plan, or absence of mistake or accident. So that's the court's limiting instruction. With that, then, is the state ready to call another witness before the lunch recess?
We are, Your Honor.
All right, you can call your next witness.
All right.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would call Deputy Coulter Cannon.
Coulter
right.
Cannon. I remember that TV show. That was a great TV show.
What is it?
Coulter Cannon.
That was a show?
No, Jay, it was not a show.
I don't. That's totally over my head.
He's got like a TV show like cop name, Coulter Cannon. Coulter Cannon investigates.
Well, I swear we're from the testimony you're about.
Yes, I love malt vinegar too. It's delicious. It's great on fish and chips. I'm so excited. I'm going to the UK, and I told you that, right?
Yeah, for the Crime Con. When is that?
Yeah, September.
All right, now that the officer's been
First time
sworn, I'll just inquire on the court's exclusionary order.
What
trial
date?
has been broadcast and is available for public view. Deputy Cannon, have you reviewed or listened to or observed any of the trial testimony in this case since it began?
No, I have not.
Okay, and have you discussed with any other witnesses their testimony in the trial?
No, I have not.
All right, thank you for that acknowledgement. Mr. Wixom, you can inquire on direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Deputy Cannon.
Morning.
Could you please state and spell your full name for the record?
Yes, it's Coulter Cannon, Colter. Cannon is Cannon.
And where do you work?
I work for Fremont County Sheriff's Office.
What do you do for the Sheriff's Office?
Right now, I am a school resource officer, but I'm also a patrol deputy.
How long have you worked for the Sheriff's Office?
Approximately 10 years.
If you were to explain to the jury how many years as patrol officer exclusively and how many years also as a resource officer?
I've spent about 4.5 years as a patrol deputy and then 5 years in the schools. And then in the summertime, I go out to patrol. So.
And briefly for the jury's sake, what does a resource officer at a school do?
Mainly just handles any calls inside the schools that he patrols in, making the schools safe and secured and making sure nobody's there that shouldn't be there.
And what training and experience do you have as a law enforcement officer?
I graduated post-academy, so I received my basic certificate. I've also advanced up into my intermediate certificate, and then I've taken numerous trainings throughout my years of service on different trainings throughout the years and continue that training through each year.
Can you explain to the jury, what does it mean to have an intermediate certificate?
It just means that I've had so many years of service and then had so many training hours that I've been able to advance up into the certificates.
Coulter Cannon,
I
patrol.
want to call your attention back to October 9th of 2019. Do you recall if that's a day that you were doing patrol duty?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall whether or not you responded to a call involving a Tammy Daybell?
Yes, I did.
And based upon your recollection, what was the nature of that call?
It was put out as a suspicious call, suspicious circumstance.
Can you describe what you were told or what you understood that suspicious circumstance was?
Yeah, so that day I got a call of a gentleman that was at a residence that had pointed a paintball gun or a gun at a female in her driveway. So we responded to the area to check it out.
More Alex Cox shit.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the state would wish to play two different stipulated exhibits. One would be state's proposed 232A.
232A?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And that is a 911 call from a Joe Murray. The second will be state's 232B, which is a dispatch call from Tammy Daybell, both of the same date.
All right, Mr. Priors, the defense had an opportunity to review these proposed exhibits.
Yes, Judge, I have, and there's no objection.
All right, so exhibit 232A and exhibit 232B are both admitted into the record. I presume those are each an audio file on a separate thumb drive. Is that correct?
They are, Your Honor, if I might offer them up just so the court can observe them.
Okay.
So, okay. I need to grab my laptop too. I'd forgotten.
Okay, if you'll do that, I'll have the court clerk as well take a look at those.
Jay, the chat has moved into food zone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fully in food world in the chat, completely and totally.
I see that.
Sure. You want these returned to be published, Mr. Wixom?
If I may, Your Honor.
All right, I'll have the bailiff return them. Thank you.
And Judge, I'm not certain if I heard the court rule or if I even requested, but are these exhibits admitted?
They are.
Thank you.
I see that, Missy.
Total lunch mode.
I am starving myself. So I mean, you guys aren't helping me with my starvation. I'll tell you that. Until I forget who brought up hard-boiled eggs and pickled with beets. That calmed my hunger down a little bit. Not a beet guy. I've tried. I've really tried. I've tried to love beets and can't do it. They're very earthy.
And for the record, the first exhibit that I will be playing is State's Exhibit 232A.
Coulter Cannon holding up lunch guy.
I apologize.
Well, we don't accept your apology. You're holding up lunch, bro. Let's go.
Yeah, how dare you, sir?
How dare you, sir?
Okay. Yeah, we'll activate the podium microphone.
Thank you.
All right, if you'd like to start it, Mr. Wixom, we should be able to.
Thank you.
Pickled bologna is the grossest thing. I don't know. My mom used to eat pickled pig's feet. Oh.
911,
Yeah.
like emergency?
They looked exactly like they said.
Yeah, so my mother-in-law, who lives pretty close, had just gotten home about 10 minutes ago, was unloading her car, and she thinks a man, but she's not 100% sure she didn't see, because they were wearing a ski mask, came up to her with a paintball gun, but they started shooting at her. It wasn't loaded, so it didn't, nothing came out of it. But he kept asking him what he was doing. He would respond, and then suddenly, after she told out her husband, he ran off.
Okay, what's the address? Are you there? Hello? Are you still there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, now I can hear you. What's the address?
It's 199 North, 1900 East, Rexburg, Idaho, 83440. That's my address. She lives in the corner. I don't know what her address is.
Okay, I need her address. What's her location?
I think it's 201, I think is her address.
201 North 1900 East?
North, yep.
Does she know which direction he ended up running?
He headed east, back behind their house.
Okay, and did she give you a description of the clothing?
I didn't get one from her. I don't know that.
And what is your name?
My name is Joseph Murray.
Okay, is this a good phone number for you?
Yep.
Okay, I am sending a deputy out to your mother's home.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And for the record, Your Honor, I would next play 232B, the dispatch call from Tammy Daybell.
Very well.
October 9, 2019, 21 hours, 49 minutes, 20 seconds.
Fremont County Sheriff's Office.
Hi, I need to report something.
Okay, go ahead. What's the address?
Okay, at 202 North, 1900 East, the corner with the blinking yellow light on Salem Highway.
Is it a suspicious person?
Yes.
Okay, what was he wearing?
He was all dressed in black and he had a ski mask on.
And he said the blinking light now is where you saw him?
No, he's gone now because I pulled up into our driveway and I was getting stuff out of the back seat of my car and suddenly he was there and he had a paintball gun and he was and like he was going to shoot at me. And I kept asking him what he was doing because I could tell it was a paintball thing.
Okay.
And then he just kept doing it. So I yelled for my husband and then he took off running around the back of my house.
Okay, give me just 1 minute. Stay on the line with me.
Okay.
October 9, 2019, 21 hours, 50 minutes, 28 seconds.
That was North 1900 East?
Yes.
Okay.
October 9, 2019, 21 hours, 50 minutes, 43 seconds.
In what direction he was going?
He went behind my house and it's so dark out here and I just went in the house and got my husband and son and then they went out and looked and he was long gone by then.
Okay.
So he was on the north side of my house is where he went to get away.
Okay.
He didn't say anything or he just kept like he was holding the gun like he was, had a rifle and just shooting at me. So But nothing came out of the gun either, so I don't think it was loaded.
Okay, and what is your name, ma'am?
My name is Tammy Daybell.
Okay, I will pass your information on to my deputies. We actually just had a previous call about this individual, so they're out in the area looking now.
Okay, yeah, I think it was my son-in-law who lived diagonal from us that called you guys already.
Oh,
so
okay.
I just wanted to make sure it got reported. So,
let's see. And what's your son-in-law's name?
Joseph Murray.
Okay, yep, it was him.
Okay.
So, all right, I have a deputy that will be out at your home here shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Deputy Cannon, do you recognize the information relayed in those two calls as essentially the same information that you were asked to respond to?
Yes, it was.
And can you help the jury understand, is there a difference when someone calls 911 as opposed to calling in dispatch?
Just a different phone number, I believe. I'm not 100% familiar with that. 911 is our emergency line, and then there's a non-emergency line that goes there as well.
Okay. What time of day or night do you recall responding to this?
It was approximately around 9:00 p.m.
And do you recall at that point in the year, was it dark outside or was it light outside?
The sun was going down. It was dusk.
And how far away from the address that you were given were you in your patrol when you first received the call?
I was only a couple miles away. I was in the Egan area.
And so was this the type of call when you were responding? Did you activate your sirens and lights?
I did initially activate my lights and sirens, and then when I got closer, I deactivated them.
Why did you deactivate them?
I didn't want the subject hear me coming or see me coming. I wanted to be able to find him.
Right. And how long did it take for you to actually arrive at the address from the time that you were dispatched to the call?
It was approximately 6 to 7 minutes.
And what's the first thing that you did when you did arrive at that address?
I initially drove around the property, around the roads in that area, trying to look for a suspect wearing that clothing description. And then I went and made contact at the residence with Tammy.
Your Honor, at this time, would it be appropriate to stop for our lunch break?
Yeah, we're right at that time, Mr. Wixom. So if you've got some more direct, I would say yes.
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
Okay. Let's go ahead and take our lunch recess then. We're stopping just short of the noon hour. So I think we'll try to come back on if we can in an hour at 1 o'clock. So we'll be in recess until then.
All right, please.
All right, folks, lunch for an hour like they've been doing. And if you're coming in later, you didn't hear nothing going on with Karen Reed today. Tomorrow, likely they finish picking, and then it looks like Monday, as of right now, maybe the day they start the trial. So,
yep. Because for some bizarre reason, court's dark today. They anticipate they'll get it done tomorrow, but I don't know why, since trial was scheduled to start Monday or picking the jury, unless they made the schedule out ahead of time and they knew they were not going to be doing Thursday, Friday ahead of time.
the only thing I can think of, sometimes we do here in New York, it depends on the Passover, maybe like a religious thing. I don't know. I mean, I'm just speculating, but like we used to, when I was in court, we used to go to court. They would, like, if there were certain days that were very important or people had stuff going on, they would obviously not. But I don't think that would be it. So I don't know.
I don't know. It could be. You know, the East Coast does. They do really honor and take off court far more than like in the Midwest for high holy holidays for Jewish religion. Like in Illinois, they don't do it as much, but when we lived on the East Coast, they did. Like when we were in Philadelphia. So maybe potentially.
Yeah. Shannon's from Kansas. Let me tell you, they were not off for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Typically from their schools where we're all off. So
right.
Anyway, so we will be back in 1 hour. Thank you guys so much for being here, and I'll set up the stream. And
yeah, we love you guys. Get yourself something to eat. You guys have now officially made. You guys got me back hungry because somebody brought up crawfish boil, which, yeah, I would have to imagine that the concept of a crawfish disgusts you.
All of the fish. Jim Gaffigan does a bit. You're basically taking these little sea monsters out of the sea and eating them. They're like gross spiders of the sea. I don't want any of that shit. Any fish, any of those crawling creatures, I want none of them.
Hot Pockets. Yeah,
that's the best bit. Hot Pockets.
Right? All right, y'all. We love you. We'll see you on the other side.